All right, folks, we are live for now 7 seconds. Before I start on the topic of the day, please point out in the comments if you can hear me all right. If you are watching this as a recorded video, there is no need to respond to this question. This is only if you guys are watching it live. Just like last time, there is going to be a contest of sorts. Whoever guesses what this is gets a t-shirt. If you feel that you've gotten close enough, please send me an email at swag, S-W-A-G, at darklordofoptics.com with your information, the size you want, and I'll send you a t-shirt. You can keep on making guesses for as long as the live cast is on. If you are watching this as a recorded video, it is too late. Anyhow, can you guys hear me all right? Please put something in the comments if you can. Anyone? Anyone at all? There are 10 people watching. Can you hear me? Yes, it is booze. Just so that you know, when I'm doing a live cast, this is alcohol. This is coffee. And this is water for when I can't talk anymore. All right, you guys can hear me fine. Let's do that. All right, couple announcements before I get going. So I got a bunch of new scopes to look at, and I'll be looking at them. Everything takes me a while. I'm thorough. The first and probably the most relevant to what we're talking about today is this SIG Tango 6, 1-6 by 24 with DWLR6 reticle. This is the exact model that won the SDMR contract for SIG. So it's a front focal plane scope with a BDC reticle including wind. Excuse me. My brother watches this show and for some reason sends me a text. That's not relevant. Okay. Pardon me. So I've got the SIG Tango 6. That's going to be interesting. I have a few small red dot sights to look at that are interesting for different reasons. One of the brands I really want to pay attention to this year's Crimson Trace. You know, they are sort of on their second generation of their products. They're rethinking, going after slightly different markets. I have a couple of small red dot sights from Crimson Trace. This Doctor Footprint, to me, it looks a little bit like what used to be Fastfire 3 from Burris, but not quite. The screen is larger. It's interesting. This is a tiny little thing that fits in a Shield RMS J-point footprint. So these are more. This is more of a handgun sight for me. This I'll see. I also have a really clever, and I've been playing with this. I took it off the gun to show you, since I can't show guns on a live cast. And this is a Holosun with the primary arms ACSS Vulcan reticle. And the reticle is super clever. I'm going to do a separate show on this thing. I've got a chance to play with this now. There's some really clever things going in there. Okay, Lee. You're already 3 whiskeys in, an Irish and 2 bourbons. What makes you think that I am not? Let's see, what else do I have? I have a new rifle scope from Crimson Trace. It's a fairly basic hunting rifle scope, 329 by 50 Brushline Pro. It's a new line made in the Philippines. Interesting reticle. I'll talk about this more later, but remember how Nikon used to have this BDC reticle with little circles? Well, this is a similar concept, but instead of circles, they're using diamonds. And the vertices of the diamond are more useful than the rounded part of the reticle. I'm not a huge proponent of BDC reticles and second focal plane scopes, but in moderate magnification scopes, they work okay. So that's going to be very, very interesting to see for me. And last, well, not last, and definitely not least, I received a range-finding binocular from Delta Optics. And, the market right now is flush with range-finding binoculars. The reason I was interested in this guy, see how well you can see it here. I was interested in this guy, and because of the configuration. So most of them are either 8 power or 10 power. And generally, I prefer 8 for general purpose use, but when you are when it has a laser rangefinder built in, sometimes it's helpful to have just a little more magnification. But I'm not the steadiest guy in the world. So 10 is still a little more than I like. I mean, almost only 10 power laser rangefinder binocular like that I really liked was a Leica HDB because it has a weird shape that just fit my hand so well. So this guy is a 9x45. So I get my 5mm exit pupil and 9 time magnification, and it seems to be a pretty good compromise for me. So I started playing with it. It is really nice. So more on that later. And let's see. Okay, and I'm about to formally kick off a comparison of different rifle vises. I've got 2 from Field Optics Research. I'm familiar with their products, but this is new and better stuff, and mine is older. A conventional clamp and a rifle vise where the clamps adjust. So if you have a hunting rifle where the stock is slightly tapering, this can actually hold on to it. So that's going to be interesting to play with. And the good people at RRS, Really Right Stuff, sent me their vise, which is looking really, really well made. All 3 of these are pretty well made, and I will have the what's it called? The claw grip, the Reaper grip here in a few days as well. And 3 companies is enough for me to kick things off. Sent an email to Hog Saddle and a couple others, and they all ignored me. So I'll do what I have, right? So Doug is looking to sample in March. Want to ask you about the model. So yeah, if you want sort of a general purpose crossover type scope that can do a little bit of everything, that's the one. I've done a little bit of consulting for March, and that scope in many ways is the result of that. And that's my reticle, so I'll select the reticle. I'm planning to get one of these production ones as well to do a full test. I have a slightly pre-production model here now that I'm messing with, and it is quite good. And I expect the production one, there will be a couple of small changes to be even better. Okay. All right, we've got enough people watching, and so I thought that first of all, I'll toast to all of you who take your time to come here and listen to my ramblings. At least that way I feel like I'm not drinking alone, which is nice. And let's talk about LPVOs, low power variable optics. I keep on coming back to these scopes just because there's been so much development and they are improving so rapidly, and there's such a tremendous variety in the market, and it's only growing, it's only getting bigger. So when I'm somewhat prolific on a variety of different online forums, although a little bit less so these days, since I am trying to do more of these shows and trying to do more with my website, the darklordofoptics.com. For those of you who are here for the first time, and because they're so prolific, I see all sorts of interesting, fiery arguments. What is better, second focal plane, front focal plane, and this and this, and why is the objective so small? This one comes up all the bloody time. the most common argument, interestingly, is about a Vortex Razor Gen3 1 to 10 by 24, which, by the way, I still can't find for 2 weeks now. It's here somewhere. I know this goddamn thing is here somewhere. Anyhow, yeah, instead of it, I still have the March 1 to 10 here, which is very, very nice. Same business. It's a 24 millimeter objective. So with the 10 power, why can't you go bigger? Well, there are good reasons why you may not necessarily want to. I get this impression that so many people are looking at low power variable optics in a wrong way. If you are out for a scope where that will be primarily used on 10 power, a 1 to 10 optic is not what you should be looking at. And to arrive to that conclusion, I think it's worth our while to first think about why this class of optic is here, how it developed, how it started out. In principle, a low power variable optics in a traditional way is a rifle scope that starts on 1 power or sometimes 1.1. There's a few scopes that don't quite make it to true 1 power. So something starts right around there and has a somewhat smallish objective, right? I like to excuse me. I like to classify scopes by objective diameter. So for me, there are the low power variable optics. That's the 1 to 10 by 24, 1 to 6 by 24, 1 to 4 by 24. Scopes that are on the front, like this guy, have virtually a straight tube or close to it, right? And next step up are the tweener rifle scopes. So these are the rifle scopes where the objective lens in a 30 to 36 millimeter diameter approximately. Traditionally, it were 2 to 7 by 32. Stuff like, so this is the SWF ultralight, which is sort of an example of a modern tweener. There are not that many of these. Unfortunately, I think it's a very overlooked rifle scope type. And then you go up to 40 to 44 millimeter objective, then 50 and higher, and stuff like that. The reason, okay. So Albert, what I'll do, I'm gonna sort of do my rant, and then I'm gonna go back and look through the question and answer them also. Please stick around. There is this place for these that's probably loopholed, and it's a nice scope, partly because it is so light and gives you flexibility. But unless you're looking for the lightest weight in the modern world, to me, that would not be good enough. Okay. Anyway, so where were we? Yes. So these are the scopes that start on 1 power, and this 1 power is important, and 1 power is difficult to build. And there are many reasons for it, but the most obvious is that our eye is really picky when you're on 1 power, and if you're trying to go fast and you have both eyes open, all sorts of weird things happen. If you look through a rifle scope that's supposed to be 1 power and it's not 1, it's 1.2, you will see it quite easily. But if it's a 6 power rifle scope and it's really 6.5 or 7, without looking at things side by side, you cannot tell which is which, right? Because once it's magnified, it's a different ballgame. We perceive it and process the image and interpret the image entirely differently. 1 power makes things fairly challenging. Okay. Low power variable scopes exist because of the need for this 1 power. Traditionally, if you wanted to go fast, you got a red dot. And, Lord knows I have a few of them here. For example, nice, fast, good collimation. I have slight astigmatism. The dot on this side actually still looks pretty sharp, which is nice. And I'm quite fast with it. But the distance, the engagement distance is somewhat limited. And as I get older, it gets more limited. My eyes are not what they used to be. And I'm relying on batteries, although modern red dot sights last forever. For example, this guy also has a solar battery that keeps it recharged. My home defense one has tritium and fiber optic illumination and a battery and a laser. So there are ways to work around the battery issues, but it's still an issue, right? But the biggest is distance, and the distance business is important at much closer ranges than you think, not because of shooting, but because of target identification. It's, you can shoot something of appropriate size with a red dot sight without magnification, 100 yards, 200, 300 if you have good eyes, etc. But the question is, can you identify whether that is something that needs to be shot? And therein lies a complication. That's one of the reasons, for example, why prismatic scopes, fixed power prismatic scopes like this LCAN, this is a 4-power LCAN with a little red dot on top, right? One of the reasons these persevered for so long, I'm lucky I can use the bin naming concept pretty well, meaning I have a brightly illuminated reticle. This is 4-power. I can keep both eyes open and scan, and it works pretty well for me, but still not as fast as true 1-power. But when I need to slow down for a fraction of a second and take a look and make a judgment whether whatever I am planning to shoot actually needs to be shot, that is important. And a low power variable scope in principle allows you to do a variety of all of these things. Changing magnification takes a little bit of practice. That's why, for example, this guy has a cattail so that you can change magnification faster. But you don't have to, right? The catch is that with a low power variable optic, you can kind of choose how you run it. You can just run it on 1 power and only dial up when you you have time. You can mostly run it in some intermediate magnification, have an offset red dot, have also both worlds, or drop it on 1 power when you know. Drop it on 1 power when you know you have something you need, something that's going to be happening fast, that kind of stuff. The low power variable optic combines a little bit of everything in it. It allows you to extend your range further than you can do with a typical prismatic, while still maintaining speed when you need to, right? So, but the one thing you can't never give up with a low power variable scope is this performance on 1x. Because if you don't need that low magnification, if you don't need true 1x, this is not a scope you should be looking at, because you are paying more money for capability that you don't necessarily need. In a weird way, in a scope like this, it's much easier to get good performance, good 6-power performance optically than 1 power. 1 power is harder. Okay. And if you want, I can get more technical in a future video and explain why. But it just is. So everything for low power variable scope starts with how fast it is on 1 power. And that is a combination of several things. It needs to be true 1x magnification. It needs to have a reticle that is easily visible without aid of illumination, usually with the aid of illumination. That's how it typically works. And everything else is in addition to that. So if you are looking to buy a low power variable scope, think carefully. Do you need that 1 power? If you will only be using it at speed at close ranges very sporadically, or at least you don't think that is the primary functionality, you can often do better with a more conventional scope and an offset red dot, although that will take some amount of training. I'm gonna pause for a moment. Yes, Christopher. Have you been able to check out March 1.5 to 15 by 42? I do have one here. Thank you, Gilberto. Keep your eyes on the road, man. Gilberto is driving and still following along. I really appreciate that. Okay. All right. One power. One power is absolutely critical. Okay. So no matter what other features you add to a low power variable scope, if they compromise performance on one power, I can make a really solid argument that all those features are really not needed, or just something that you should not be focusing on. Okay. One of the things that happens with low power variable optics is that getting good performance on one power is much easier with a smaller objective lens than with a larger objective lens. The reason why all these scopes like this, that's a Delta Striker, like the March I have behind me, the reason they all have these fairly small objective lenses, usually in a 20 to 28 millimeter diameter, the reason for those objective lenses is performance on one power. Okay. Performance on high magnification would be better with a larger objective, but that is secondary to performance on one power. Okay. How do you get speed on one power? There are different schools of thought in this, and that starts coming down to reticle design. For example, once again, the two scopes I have here, the SIG Tango 6T and a Delta Striker, both are 1:6 by 24. This is second focal plane. The SIG I have is front focal plane, although it comes with both. Which one is better on one power? Okay. Honestly, I don't know yet, because I just got the SIG, but to be better than the Delta, I'm looking at my notes. Okay. There we go. I just got the SIG and I haven't played with it as much yet. I've looked at it quite carefully, and I think it will do quite well on one power. Whether it's going to be better than the Delta, I do not yet know, but both look to be quite competent. Are they going to be as fast as the Vortex Razor 1 to 10 that I have? Hard to say. Okay. Most scopes that perform well on one power at speed have a reticle arrangement that draws your eye to the center of the image, and that works really well with the way human visual perception works. We sort of naturally aim to the center. If you think about the evolution of humans as a mammalian species, we are fundamentally aiming animals. Aiming at something, throwing things at something, etc., is something very natural for us. It's one of the many reasons why so many of us are drawn to shooting, because there is something very primal about being able to aim at something good distance away and hitting it. I can make a pretty good argument, although it's not my field, and there are people out there who can make a much better argument of that. Okay, that our eyes evolved the way they did because of the ability to aim. We have binocular vision, so that we can judge distance like many predators do, though humans by definition are not predators, right? But the way we see and process images has a ton to do with aiming. So when you are designing an aiming system, a rifle scope in this case, you really have to pay a lot of attention to make sure that it works for the way human perception works. Okay, just to repeat, guys. So I see your comments. Once I'm done with my general purpose rant, and we'll look at a couple of reticle designs, I'll go back and address all of the comments. Okay, and I have some updates about some of the things you're talking about. Anyhow, so what works for us? What works for us is having a distinct aiming point somewhere in the center. And one of the things that happens with second focal plane scopes, if you make a comparatively complicated reticle, no matter what you do with it, even if there's just a very bright illuminated dot and all that sort of stuff, it is still there. The reticle has the same apparent size to a human eye, whether it's on 1 power or on 6 power, right? And if you're trying to go fast and the reticle is comparatively prominent and has a lot of things that distract your eye from the center, it will affect your speed. I've looked at a ton of these, and it's really interesting in the sense that the more successful second focal plane designs all have comparatively simple reticles with a few hash marks and stuff like that, a really bright center dot. The Delta Striker is such an example, but probably the most well-known one and the most successful, arguably, is the Vortex Razor Gen3 126x24. It has very wide, nice flat field of view on 1 power. The way the eyepiece is designed, the body of the eyepiece almost disappears when you're looking through it. And it is a super bright center dot. It's this fiber optic illumination that they use. The Striker uses the same thing. Okay, the Striker is a little bit like Razor Gen3 for a little bit less money, and eyepiece is not quite as nice, although it is very similar in many ways. Okay, and if you look at all of the truly successful second focal plane designs, the reticles are not huge, and they're not super prominent. If you turn off the illumination, you can't see the reticle, but it's not super thick, it's not super bold. Okay. In principle, the first successful low power variable optics came out of Europe. This whole business with a bright reticle and putting that in an AR-15 M4, whatever, came out of some early experimentation, but around 20 years ago, I think, maybe 18 years ago, something like that, where somebody convinced Schmidt and Bender to make this 1.1 to 4x20 short dot. That was the first truly successful design of this type. But in principle, if you think about the application requiring speed, it's not terribly different from what a lot of people wanted for a dangerous game rifle, or in Europe, what was used for a driven game hunt. And if you look at some European companies like Meopta, Schmidt, Zeiss, Blaser, and others, what is they try to set up their reticles so that on 1 power, what you have is this bright dot in the center and nothing else, and that works. And that came out of primarily of the driven game stuff. Well, driven game hunt is wonderful. If your battery is dead, worst thing that's going to happen, you're not gonna shoot that pig. If we're talking about tactical applications, you do want to have some sort of redundancy. You do want that edged reticle to help you a little bit, even if your battery has died. And that has been one of the points of contention between some European offerings that I've seen and some American ones. Not too long ago, I spent a lot of time with the Vortex Razor Gen3 1 to 10 on one hand, and a Schmidt 1 to 8x24 dual CC. Both are exceptional scopes. I ended up keeping the Vortex, and that's been my go-to scope. I think I've freaking lost it somewhere in this house. It'll pop up. If we're not done too late today, I'm going to go look for it. All right, and the Schmidt, on the other hand, is optically better, very, very expensive. If I could afford it, I'd buy it. I don't think I can afford it. But it is optically exceptional. I had only one problem with the Schmidt. The way they designed the reticle, it came out of this European tradition that originally I think came out of the driven hunt, where on 1 power, you have this bright dot, super easy to aim, but if your battery is off or dead, there is no reticle. You basically can't see anything. And several Euroscopes that I've seen, like the Blaser 127x28 and others, they were all kind of like that. Okay, so there is a little bit of a preference there. Before I go and show you a couple of pictures of reticle designs and spend a few minutes telling you what I think about those, where do my personal preferences lie in terms of second focal plane versus front focal plane? If it is a well-designed front focal plane reticle, meaning it works across magnification range, and this can be done, I generally like front focal plane. However, making a brightly lit front focal plane reticle is harder and more expensive. So in a perfect world where I had unlimited money, I'd have perfectly designed front focal plane everything and be fine. And why do I say that? So the way I shoot up close, I use 1 power. Further away, I dial up to whatever is top magnification. But I spent quite a lot of time practicing shooting somewhat slow fire offhand. And for that, going to too high of a magnification gives me a little bit of trouble. And I'm usually on 2-3 power somewhere there. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, depending on conditions and what exactly I'm doing and stuff like that. And for me, it's just a little bit easier when the reticle dimensions and stuff are always the same. However, since I do not have unlimited funds, and I have to kind of watch how much money I spend, on 1-3, 1-4 power rifle scopes, I'm perfectly comfortable with well worked out second focal plane designs. Once we get to 1-6, I can go either way. I mean, for example, like I showed you before, I have 2 scopes here, front focal plane, a second focal plane, and I am quite confident I can use both. I'll use them slightly differently, but I can use both in good faith. Once we go to 1-8 or 1-10, and I'm sure more is coming, I start leaning increasingly more toward front focal plane designs, where the reticle zooms in and out together with the image, and my wind holds and things like that, lead holds are always the same at every magnification. Okay, that seems to work a little bit better for me. Now, several things to keep in mind. I like shooting to comparatively long distances with comparatively low magnification scopes. Right, I'm not a magnification hog, and for example, when I was wrapping up with this little March 1-10, and I was supposed to set it off. It's still here because I'm wrapping up an article for a magazine where I needed this. This one has side focus parallax. I'm equally comfortable with this sucker from 10 yards to 1,000 yards. Worked flawlessly. I'm quite happy with it. Okay. Why would I choose to shoot to 1,000 yards with low power scope? Well, partly because it's challenging, partly because shooting at plates and stuff, the scope is not what's holding me back. My shooting ability is what is holding me back. And honestly, I'm apparently not the only one who thinks that way, because the reticle in this SIG, that's like I said, exact same model that won the SDMR contract for SIG, is calibrated out to 1,000 meters for 308 M118 LR, I believe. And I messed around a little bit with the ballistic calculator, and it sounds like I'm not 100% certain, what the barrel length on the rifle is, it's a variant of the HK28 or 27, one of them. But it works out to 175 grain Sierra Match King at 2450 foot per second. Okay, when somebody says hello, I have to say hello. Hi, Brian. Okay, they calibrated to 1,000 meters. Does it mean they're going to be shooting to 1,000 meters all the time? No, but they've identified this as the outer limit of the capability of the weapon system, and they want the optic to be able to accommodate that. And I'm kind of with them, honestly. If it's a dedicated long-range rifle, I'm not gonna put a low power variable on it. But so many compared to a conventional semi-auto carbines today have gotten quite accurate. I can, I live at about 5,000 foot altitude, and my shooting range is a little bit higher than that. I'm perfectly comfortable taking my 56 to 800 yards or thereabouts, when I have time and a reasonable shooting position. Grendel and 308 can go to 1,000 or a little more. I'm in the process of building a 6mm arc that will take me even further. And on plates, all these smallish scopes work, and I'm not sacrificing the close range capability in any way, shape, or form. For example, for 556, I have a rifle carbine built around the 16-inch carbon wrapped proof research barrel. I think it's stupid accurate, and I'm quite comfortable shooting it quite far away. And if the rifle is capable of everything from 10 yards to 800 yards to 1,000 yards, I want to select an optic that will allow me to do all of that. Maybe not optimally, right? But I want it to allow me to do all of that. Okay. All right. So, where were we? Yeah. So reticles. Reticle is the thing that sort of makes it happen. Under normal circumstances, I try not to spend too much time dialing with low power variable scopes. I don't think that's a good way to go. Now, I like to have repeatable turrets on scopes like this. So if there is some situation I'm doing something really weird and I do need to dial, I want to have the capability. However, if under normal circumstances, I'm not going to dial. One of the reasons my sort of preferred scope of this type is the Vortex Razor Gen3 is that they set up the reticle for exactly what I want to do. I don't think they cared very much what I personally want to do, but they had some sort of a similar performance envelope in mind. For example, shooting further out with the SIG, and this guy, let me see, I pulled up a picture of the SIG reticle, and let me see if I can dig it up. There you go, I found it. I'm gonna share it on my screen so that you can see. And there we go. Okay, so this is the reticle in the SIG that I have. It is calibrated in meters, and the reticle goes to the military. It is a BDC type reticle with a dot and a horseshoe, and 2 wind holes for 5 and 10 miles per hour. It's caliber cartridge specific, but honestly, I mean, if you know what the dimensions are, and SIG conveniently puts the exact dimensions into their manual, you can kind of figure out how it works for your particular cartridge. It's not hard to guess. And since it is designed for 308, 6.5 Grendel is going to be very close. Okay, at least some loads some loads will be. Okay. Delta striker reticle. It's a second focal plane scope, so they wisely did something less complicated. And I have some actual images of that. Where is it? There we go. Hold on. That I have so many images that I opened to take a look that now it's taking me a little bit more time and effort. So there you go. So this is an actual image of a reticle. It's all also, most of these images are also on my Instagram. And there we go. Okay, you should be able to see a reticle. It's a basic milliradian reticle, not too dissimilar from the reticle that Vortex uses. It's a nice bright dot. But if I needed to use a reticle to shoot pretty far away, given that there is always wind of some sort, this reticle would limit me. Okay, so if I really want to extend the range, the SIG is going to be an easier scope to do it with, just based on the reticle, than the striker. Now, what I do not know if the illumination in the SIG is bright enough on 1 power. I think it is, but I need to do more testing. So it's going to be very interesting to see if the delta in the SIG give me similar speed on 1x, and I really don't know that. Okay. Vortex did something very clever, in my opinion. Let me find an image and pull it up. So this is okay. This is 4 snapshots taken. Pardon me. Taken through the Vortex Razor Gen3. And if you look at the image, so the bottom right is 1 power. Bottom left is, I don't remember, probably something like a 2 or 2.5. Top left is 6 or 7. And no, top left is 10 power, excuse me. And top right is probably 6 or 7 or thereabouts. Only the center donut is illuminated. This was not the brightest setting, but it wasn't a bright day, and in the brightest nuclear setting, you can absolutely see the dot. Only the center dot is illuminated. Let me see, can you see my mouse? Yeah, you can see. One of the nice things Vortex did, I think Nightforce did it even better with the attacker reticle, but this works for me. They left these 3 floating thick bars that I can use for lead on 1 power, and that kind of identify where I'm supposed to aim if, God forbid, the reticle dies. SIG didn't do it, which is one of the things I did not like. However, on higher magnification, the Vortex reticle was gave me this tree that goes up, I think, to about 11 milliradian, which is perfectly reasonable to get to about 1,000 yards, or something along those lines. Okay. For front focal plane designs, what is emerging as the dominant reticle type is pretty much what Vortex is doing, what Nightforce is doing with the attacker F1, what Schmidt is doing. I had a Schmidt reticle here that I can pull up. Where is it? Okay, there, that's a Schmidt reticle. Let me bring that up. I'm going to pull up the Schmidt reticle for you to show you. Schmidt is taking sort of an intermediate approach. Why do I not see the Schmidt reticle? This is it, I think. Yes. Schmidt is taking sort of an intermediate approach. The tree is a little bit smaller. It's a 6 milliradian tree. So with the 56, it takes you to approximately 600 yards. And beyond that, you can dial. I'm actually okay with that, right? And Schmidt turrets lock, and they're wonderful. Schmidt did something even more clever than everybody else with illumination. There are two distinct illumination types. There's a bright dot in the second focal plane where only the center dot lines up. And then there is the low light compatible illumination where, well, what you see, the image is illuminated. So ultimately, this is a better system, but it's two separate illumination systems. It's one of the many reasons why that scope is as expensive as it is. But these kind of things, this is emerging as the dominant reticle type for front focal plane scopes, where you either have a small milliradian tree, like in a Razor or Schmidt, or a small BDC tree, or maybe not such a small one, like in the SIG reticle that I just showed you. Vortex has another reticle option, which is a BDC type reticle, also a tree type design, calibrated for specific yardages, etc. In principle, they both work. Okay, I slightly prefer this kind of a milliradian type reticle, simply because I have a bunch of different guns. They'll have different holds. I know them in milliradian. With the BDC reticle, there is always some sort of an adjustment, and I look at a ton of scopes, right? And the milliradian is a milliradian no matter what scope you're looking at. So I prefer that. However, both are viable approaches. And if you are a one-gun kind of guy, or, well, having only one gun is unethical, but you understand what I mean, it doesn't matter. Pick one, get used to it. You'll be totally fine. The point is that if you are looking to extend the range, even with low power variables, front focal plane designs are kind of where it's at. Okay. With a second focal plane design, if you really want to extend the range, you either have to have a really tree reticle that's prominent, that will slow you down on one power, or you have to dial. Dialing is a perfectly viable option. You just have to be cognizant that that's the way to do it. If it is a low power variable, at least within 600-700 yards, I don't want to dial. Maybe that's just me. Okay. All right. I think that's the gist of my original rant. I will have a sip of coffee. I'll look through the comments and see where that takes us. And if you guys have questions on anything else specific to LPVOs or generic to features or about different models, please bring it up. I can talk more about the reticles. I've designed a few here and there for LPVOs as well as precision rifle scopes. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. Reticles are in the eye of the beholder, right? So the ones that work for me or that I like may not work for you. You may not like. Everybody sees things differently in some way. The reason I go through this in this length, in some amount of detail, is that I'm trying to walk you through my thought process, why I make the decisions that I make. If I just tell you, well, this is what I like, this is what you should use, I think that is less valuable than if I explain how I arrived to my decision. And hopefully you can follow somewhat similar decision process and arrive to a decision that works well for you. If that happens to be in disagreement with what I choose, I'm totally comfortable with that, right? I don't necessarily want you to make my choice. I want you to make the right choice for you, which is why I'm here. Anyway, so let's look at the comments and see what we've got. Okay. All right. Everybody could hear me. That's good. We talked about the March. Okay. So let's talk about that in a little bit more length. I think I need a little bit more fuel. And we'll see. So Doug is looking at a March rifle scope. This is not a low power variable, but once I open it up to a Q&A, there wasn't that much left. Once I open it up to a Q&A, it's pretty much open to whatever you guys want to ask. So For those who joined late, if you can guess what I'm drinking, send me an email at swag, SWAG, at darklordofoptics.com. I'll put it in the video description later. Tell me your size and tell me why you think you deserve this, and I'll send you a t-shirt like this to your address. Okay. March traditionally came out of this sort of F-class benches shooting, and they make really nice scopes. Optically, mechanically, March makes exceptional stuff. Absolutely high-end. And I've used quite a few of them. Have a long history with all of the different front focal plane and some second focal plane precision-oriented March scopes. And I started pushing them to make a scope with greater depth of field. Because one of the things that happens with March scopes is that they go for a fairly high magnification ratio, and to keep a scope comparatively extreme, one of the things that gets sacrificed is depth of field. And one of the things that happens when you sacrifice that is you start messing with the parallax a lot. So earlier March scopes have a reputation for somewhat finicky parallax. Now you can dial it in to be super sharp, and it comes out of this target background and it all works. But if you need to engage multiple targets at different distances rapidly, you'll be putzing around with the parallax. So this scope, 4.5 to 28 by 52, came out of some of our earlier conversations on a scope that would provide a little bit of more of a depth of field than Marches usually do, without being too huge. So there is a compromise, right? It's not going to give you as much depth of field as the 5 to 25 by 56 tangent theta, but it's still going to be good. And it's going to weigh a lot less. So in many ways, this is a type of a scope that goes after the 4 to 20 by 50 crowd. It's about that size or smaller than quite a few, but it gives a little bit more magnification, and you have more depth of field than typical March scopes, not the usual optical and mechanical March goodness. So that's the idea behind this scope. The scope that I have here that I'm looking at, it's an almost production prototype. They're making a couple of optical changes, so I think the production is going to be even better. But I like the thing as is. Okay. If you do buy one, let me know how you like it. FML TR1 is a reticle I designed for March. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. And I like the reticle. I'm going to get, for my personal use, that same exact model. Okay. Mr. Second Guess Always. I think it's your first Dark Lord of Optics livecast. Thank you for joining us. What low power variable optic would you recommend for 10.5 inch 300 blackout AR? Honestly, it kind of depends on how you use it. So I have an AR-15 like that with, I think, a 10.5 inch Seekins barrel. It's a AR pistol. That's sort of my home defense gun, and I've got a red dot on it. It is capable and reasonably accurate and can reach some distances, but I haven't shot it far enough to really think it requires a low power variable. I've had red dots on it, and I've had low power prismatics on it. For a gun like that, that's fairly short and fairly light, what happens is that I really want something lightweight and compact. And a lot of, quite a few low power variable optics, by the time you add a mount and everything, start getting kind of hefty, and they really change how the gun handles and how the gun handles and behaves. Because of that, there are not that many options that are truly good. And the basic question that comes up is that, do you really need that one power? Because if you don't, if you are plinking at the range, something like that, maybe a fixed power prismatic would be a better idea. For example, I really like this 2-power primary arms prism. Swamp Fox makes excellent 1 and 3 power prisms. They work. In a perfect world, I would have said that Steiner P4XI 1 to 4 by 24 is your huckleberry. but that scope only comes with a BDC reticle that's calibrated for 556. If you are comfortable figuring out what the holes are and how they correspond to your ammo of choice, then the Steiner P4XI 1 to 4x24 is a really good option. Unfortunately, it's gone up in price over the last couple of months. It used to be less expensive, but it is really good on 1 power. It is comparatively lightweight. The dot is nice and bright, and the 556 holes, you can figure out what they are for your cartridge. So if you went with a low power variable, that would be at the top of my list. And another one would be, well, this guy actually, the Delta Striker that I keep on talking about, partly because it's quite good, partly because it is quite light. I think it's about 3 ounces heavier than the Steiner. It's in the same base. It's even lighter, I think, than the Leupold VX6 HD 126. So something like that. But basically, look for good 1 power performance and lightweight. So Steiner P4XI would be where I start. I personally start looking if I wanted low power variable, but my gun of this type has a red dot on it, and if I really want to shoot further, I take a magnifier and put it on when I go to the range, right? So for example, I don't require too much magnification for my magnifiers. So this Vortex Micro 3X is small and fairly light, and it has a QD mount. So with quite a few of my guns that generally just have red dot or holographic, what I do is I normally just keep the red dot on it. And then if I, for whatever reason, I want to go shoot longer distances, whatever else, I just put a magnifier on for that particular exercise. For guns like this, I don't think low power variable is an optimal choice. So if you're still Albert, if you're still here and around, add some commentary in terms of how you're planning to use the gun, and I may be able to say something more useful. Okay. Have you been able to check out the March 1.5 to 15x42? Yeah, I have one here. It's not a low power variable. It's more, to me, it's more of a modern general purpose hunting scope. It is very, very good. It is not cheap, but given what it offers, it is very nice. It may be, if you are comfortable with second focal plane scopes, and for hunting and stuff, I am. If you're comfortable with the second focal plane scopes, this may be the best general purpose hunting scope out there right now if you want maximum flexibility. It's quite quick on 1.5. It has good precision on 15. It's probably a very good scope for F-Class AR-15 competition, where the magnification is limited at 15 power. It's not quite as easy to get behind as some of the really fancy stuff like Magnus and those like a Magnus, and those have brighter reticles. But as far as flexibility in a compact package with really nice optical mechanical performance, this little March has a lot going for it. Okay. Mr. Pew Pew and the Crutch. LPVOs are carbine optics, in my opinion. Second focal plane works for me to use the reticle close for quick acquisition. Once the target goes past 300 yards, I set the scope on max power, 6 or 8 power, usually to shoot out farther. Yeah, that's perfectly viable way of doing this, and this is sort of how I use the Striker, right? Just second focal plane, and it works really, really well. My only problem with this is that is the reticle issue that I discussed before. If I want to use the reticle for aiming and there is any sort of wind, most tree-type reticles and second focal plane scopes, to me, are a little bit distracting on 1 power, but it's clearly workable. It clearly works for a lot of people. And if you are on a budget, it is much, much easier to find a high-quality 1 to 6 power second focal plane scope than a 1 to 6 power front focal plane scope, in my opinion. But this approach works totally fine, and a lot of people use it. Other than the reticle, the only disagreement I sort of have is that because the good performance on 1 power mandates a somewhat small objective. If you are in lower light and more difficult lighting conditions, I like to dial down a little bit to have a little bit larger exit pupil. And if you still need holds, now the reticle dimensions have changed. But to be fair, this is not a huge deal. And if the light gets quite low, you shouldn't be shooting that far away anyway. So your approach works totally fine. Mr. Nick Tall, 3 months in with my 1-6 striker, and so far the best LPVO for the money on the market, in my opinion. You're probably right. They are still selling them for, I think, $750, something like that, and can't keep them in stock. I mean, I think they're out now. I talked to the guy at Gun West not long ago. I mean, I think he brought in a few more, and they were back ordered. As I said in my Delta Striker review, I think they underpriced it, and they should raise the price given what this scope offers. Let's see what else we got. Quite a lot, actually. I'm undecided. Mr. Guest Sportsman 90. Thank you for joining. I don't think I've seen your name before, so thank you for joining in. I'm undecided between the March 1-10 and Vortex Gen3 1-10. Which one of these two would you recommend? I'll be primarily shooting close range out to 600 yards and using thermal and night vision clip-on. So both should work just fine with a clip-on. Both are fairly compact scopes. March is even shorter, so if you have issues with rail space, March might work better for you. If you're not going beyond 600, I mean, they will both work. I think the Razor Gen 3 will probably work a little better for you. They're both very good optically. March has 1-10 has side focus, so it starts having an advantage once you got to longer distances, where with the Vortex Razor you really have to watch out for parallax and depth of focus, field and stuff like that. While with the March, with the side focus adjustment, you can accommodate that. However, the first reticle in the March, it's a dual focal plane reticle. So there's a bright fiber dot in the second focal plane and some hash marks in the front focal plane. So I have not yet been able to convince them to put in a 3 reticle, which is sort of where the market is converging. It's fairly long hashes, but it's just milliradian hashes. If you want to hold for distance and wind out to 600 yards with a conventional AR-15, you may find the March reticle limiting. The March does have a very good turrets, and I've spent a lot of time exercising them. So if for shooting further out, you like using turrets, beyond 350 yards thereabouts, March is excellent, compact, does a lot of stuff. If you primarily like to hold with the reticle, I would go with the Razor Gen 3. Both are very nice options, though. Mr. Pew Pew, 6 and 8 power, plenty good for me. I can use the reticle BDC or holder of points, shoot between 300 to 600. Anything farther, I grab FFP, front focal plane, in bigger caliber with at least 2.5 to 10 with better eye relief. Yeah, it is a perfectly viable approach. I'm just weird in the sense that I like to shoot far away with lightweight, accurate carbines, and 1-10 or thereabouts. Low power variables allow me to do that better than most of the lower magnification ones. But Mr. Pew and Crutch has sort of figured out how he shoots, and once you figure that out, you can go and equip yourself with the right optics, guns, whatever else that fit the mission, that fit the application, and you might be able to save yourself some money that way. right? Buying the most. I've seen people who just go and buy them all. I've seen guys who walk into a gun store somewhere and buy an Accuracy International with a Schmidt and Bender, and I have no idea what they're doing with it. I've seen one guy like that. Somehow he managed to mount his scope backwards. Couldn't figure out why he can't see anything, right? Gear does not solve skill problems, and gear does not solve vague mission statement problems. Be clear with what you want to do. Then you can figure out how you want to do it and what tools you need. Do I have the correct idea? Yeah, I think you're very much on something. If this is the way you shoot and this is the performance envelope you're trying to cover, it's not a bad way to go. So to me, like a 1 to 10 March is at its best on a 6.5 Grendel, 6mm arc, maybe 308 ARs that I like, 716 DMR, that kind of stuff. The guns that, while being fairly light and maneuverable, do have the capability to reach way out there. Now, would I put a 1 to 10 Razor Gen3 in the 556? Yeah, and more than 556 with a 77 grain bullet can reach further than you think. But it becomes pushing it. It's less. It's also ultimately less applicable. But on a 6mm arc, that's supersonic to 1200, but you still want to use it as a general purpose gun? Yeah, right. Do I always have the ability to go grab another gun? Not necessarily. Am I going to set up all of my guns to do everything possible? Probably not. But I think there is a niche there. There is a place there for 1 to 10 low power variables on guns that can shoot from 10 to 1200 yards. I don't think any. So the question is, will Delta fix the MIL MOA mismatch on the striker low power variable? Do you know if any of these have been made available? Excuse me. On a Delta, ordered this large batch of these scopes, and somebody somewhere screwed up, and they ended up sent with MOA turrets and a milliradian reticle. Now, on a scope like this, since it's not going to be dialed very much, it's not a huge deal, but it's annoying. And they have rectified that. And I think maybe toward the end of March or thereabouts, we'll start seeing matching milliradian models. I don't know if the price is going to be the same. If I was, like I said, they might bump it up a little bit, but I don't work for Delta, so I don't have any real insight. But I talked to the guy who owns the company a couple of days ago. I asked him that same question, and he said they're coming soon. Is the Delta true 1 power? Yes, Delta Striker 1 to 6 is a true 1 power rifle scope on the low end. Could you discuss optical clarity versus optical transparency, and what, in your opinion, has some of the best optical clarity? Thanks. Спасибо. Спасибо means thank you. I probably cannot discuss it until you tell me what you mean by optical clarity and optical transparency as they apply to rifle scopes. Okay. Because one of the I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound really arrogant, and I apologize, although I sort of am an arrogant jackass, made a career out of it. But somebody looks through a scope, says, man, that's clear. That means nothing. Because perceived clarity through a rifle scope is not so simple, and it's partly rifle scope, partly how you see it, and all that sort of stuff. Optical clarity, optical transparency are terms that are nicely applicable to lens elements, but they're really, really tricky to define for an imaging device like a rifle scope. For example, how we perceive what looks really clear to us depends on a ton of things. And one of the things it really depends on is color. If contrast is really bright and apparent, it will look really, really clear, right? But it not necessarily be more light there. It may not necessarily be more transparent. It may not necessarily resolve better. Depending on what you want to do, it may not necessarily be the way to go. And it's really impossible to translate that into what clarity means. Okay. So yeah, if you can clarify what you mean, I'll try to address it. But as is, it's one of those. It's a terminology problem, right? These two terms for as they apply to rifle scopes, binoculars, that kind of stuff mean absolutely nothing. Always include budget and recommendation requests, please. Yeah, thank you for something I don't mention enough. Tell me what you want to do and tell me how much you want to spend, and I will do my best to come up with an appropriate recommendation. But otherwise, the range is too broad. Almost every low power variable optics question can be answered with go buy a Schmidt and Bender 1:8 by 24 dual CC for $4,500, and it will do everything you need almost, right? But how many of these do get really sold, right? The best general purpose, a little bit of everything, low power variable scopes right now, other than the Schmidt, are probably the Vortex Razor Gen3 1:10, March 1:10 by 24 that I have here keep on talking about, Night Force Attacker F1 1:8 by 24. Though honestly, I think Razor Gen3 is a comparable, better scope for less money, right? All of these are more than $2,000. All of these are very sophisticated front focal point scopes with bright illumination, sophisticated reticles, hard to build, cost a lot of money. Almost every low power variable scope question can be answered with one of those until I figure out that you have an $800 budget, right? And then it becomes a much more difficult question. So please keep in mind that budget matters. Wish the Delta Hornet D2BR reticle was in a striker. Thank you. I'm glad you like the reticle. I designed it. So it's possible to put that reticle in a striker. And, if there is enough demand, I'm sure Delta can do it. This same model, so it's a Light Optic Works manufactured scope, and they have versions of this scope with a wire reticle, which is where the fiber illumination is, and glass edged reticle. So they can do it. It's not difficult. The question is, though, how bright will the illumination be? And if you use a D2BR type reticle in a Delta striker, and you can, then it's probably not going to be as bright as what you have in a striker now, but there is a dot in a horseshoe, so it's still going to be quite visible. If there's enough requests, they can do it, and it will probably work fairly well. The way the D2BR reticle works, unfortunately, I didn't pull it up. Let me see if I can quickly find an image online. If not, I can probably find the original drawing I made. And when I do a search on it, I find my own videos. Give me one moment. And when I go to a vendor who sells it, he links my video. It's not hugely helpful. Okay. Let me see. So D2BR reticle has a dot and a horseshoe. There we go. All right, so we'll do this. Let me. So Ed Gun West, one of the dealers for Delta in the US has a picture of the two reticles. I designed one of them. With the other one, I did a little bit of it, and then they added their own thing. Let's see. This. Okay. So you guys see my mouse? Yes. So the D2BR reticle is this thing here on the bottom left. It is a fairly prominent horseshoe and a dot, and then it's a BDC3 type design out to 600 meters. Delta is a European company, so they asked me to calibrate it for 600 meters, but you can easily figure out how to adapt it to yards. And it's exactly halfway between 55 and 62 grain bullets. These little bars on the side correspond to different wind velocities, approximately, what was it? Approximately 4 miles per hour and 8 miles per hour, I think. Was it? Yeah. I can look it up exactly. This reticle, like all of the second focal plane reticles that have a tree, has a small problem of, on one power, the tree trying to attract a little bit too much attention. And you don't see it in the drawing too well, but if you actually use it, and I have a scope of that reticle here, if you actually try to use it, the lines for the wind bars are thinner than the primary lines, and none of that, only the reticle and the horseshoe are illuminated. So I try to strike a balance between being able to see the lines well enough while still maintaining a prominent primary aiming point. It seems to work. It seems to work pretty well. I like it. It's a nice Philippine-made scope, but once again, it's in the $400 range, I think. It seems to be quite robust, and for $400 range, you're not going to get truly day bright reticles. So the reticle is designed that in full sun you will not see illumination, and the edged reticle is enough to work well for you. But as the light gets low, illumination works really nicely. It doesn't bleed out too much, and all that. Okay. Did you buy the Hornet? I know a few have been sold in the US, but it's a new scope for the Delta. Okay. As always, I appreciate your educated opinion. Thank you, Craig. I respect how you emphasize, in my opinion, and what works for you. With time, age, I have noticed that what once worked for me no longer does. Yeah, as we get older, I'm 44, my vision is changing, everything is changing. As we get older, a lot of things work differently. But the basic analysis of how to look through the options, how to think about the application, how to pick something that works for you, the basic analysis has not changed. So in a perfect world, you'd be able to go try everything and just figure out what works for you. We live in an imperfect world. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to walk you through the thought process on the selection and save you a little bit of time of trying a ton of different stuff, so that you can think through, discard the significant number of options, narrow it down so that you are at least close before you're spending money. Okay. With all the stock market shenanigans and money printing going on lately, for someone who has a lot of money tied up in optics, how well do optics hold their value? Granted, they aren't abused. It's the first time somebody asked that question. Used scopes cost a lot less money, but they never cost zero, right? Used guns can cost less money, but they never cost zero. These are physical goods, and you're not gonna recoup your money, but you're not gonna lose all of it. I don't look at guns or optics as investments. I think you can make better investments. These are tools. I use them Not hugely concerned with how well they hold their value, but like I said, they'll never be, like any real property, they'll never be zero, right? So I don't know. I hope that answers some of your question. Maybe not enough. Dark Seath Lord. Good evening, Derek. Let's see. Okay. Albert, thank you very much. Yeah, I hope I answered your question, Albert. Like I said, if you want to clarify, if you want to get a hold of me, darklordofoptics.com, that's my website. That's the first place I check, but I look through comments and I try to answer everything. The way I'm setting things up, so the number of questions to field is going up. So the darklordofoptics.com, there is a paywall to be able to comment and post. It's a very low paywall. Since I'm sort of a 30 caliber guy, it costs you $7.62 a month. And that's a good way to get a hold of me, and that's a good way for me to filter out some of the questions. Right now, I'm a little bit past my capacity to answer everything quickly. So now some things that people ask me on forums and other places can take a while, and the number of questions going up. So darklordofoptics.com is the best way to get a hold of me. If you ask a question in the comments, I'll try to get to it quickly, but I make no guarantees. And my website is what I check first. Okay. Same business with the people who are members here on YouTube. If they ask a question, they get priority. Like Jared, for example. Do you have an opinion on scope ring height? I see most scopes mounted as low as possible, but is that your opinion? No, it's not my opinion. There is no simple answer to this, unfortunately, because it really depends on how the stock of the gun in question is set up. I mount scopes at the right height for the way I hold that particular gun. The way my face works, despite the general purpose chubbiness, you see I have comparatively high cheekbones, so I can get pretty low to a scope, and I'll show you an example. So this Delta Striker, this is a Geissele mount. It's a standard mount that's about 1.5 inches tall, and this is the SWFA ultralight in fairly standard high rings. So I'm gonna put both in my hand so you'll see a difference. Not perfect, but it will work, right? So it's about like this, okay? So the way it is set up, the SWFA in conventional rings is lower, and I can get down to it without any issues, the way my face is shaped with a conventional AR and with the types of stocks that I like. But I can't get down that low at speed quite as easily. If I want to go fast, a little bit higher, and this is a standard AR height, about 1.46 inches, I think. So it's about 2.4, 2.5 inches above the barrel axis, above the barrel. That works fast for me, but right now the trend on AR-15s is to go higher because people wear helmets, people wear gas masks, whatever else they wear. I don't know, bulletproof, COVID-proof masks. I have no freaking clue. So right now, a lot of people like this heads-up, very heads-up shooting position. Excuse me, which works really, really well until you go prone. So the way, for example, this scope for me is set up, the red dot is at about the right height where I'm standing and moving. But if I want to go prone and I'm pressed a little bit more into the stock, the scope is at the right height. But if I wear a gas mask or helmet, I cannot get down this low. It really depends. On bolt guns, there's such a variety of different stock configurations, rifle stock configurations, that I can't begin to guess what will work for you. If the stock configuration allows it, I prefer to mount the scope fairly low, just low enough where I can put a scope cap on the objective. That's usually the limiting factor. and so that the scope cap, when it's on an objective, does not touch the barrel. I don't want anything touching the barrel. Okay, so that's basically that. But you know, there are some guns where the stock COM is so high I can't do that, and then I'll go higher, right? So it really depends. Okay, Lee, I'll give you a hint. Tequila is one of those things I don't really like. I've tried, I think, although I gave it a serious effort. So Lee's going with an anejo sipping tequila. I gave tequila a shot. I gave it an honest effort. I've tried a bunch of them. There was only one tequila in unlabeled bottle that somebody bought from Mexico that I actually liked, and I did not like the rest of them. I do like mezcal, but this is not tequila. Good try. That is good news about the Delta. I'm looking to repurpose a Burris 125, and that will fit the bill nicely. Yeah, I think it is a good news about the Delta. It's a very competent design, and I'm happy that they are, you know, paying attention and looking at what people complain about and fix stuff. The Burris XTR2 125, which I think is what you're talking about, that was a very underrated scope. I really liked it. It didn't do great in the market. I'm not entirely sure why. It had a nice bright reticle. It was easy to get behind. It was a little bit on the heavy side, if I remember correctly. But it's a very nice scope. And when they were closing them out, people got amazing deals on them. Mr. Pew Pew did want a Razor Gen3, but my eyes don't work with small reticles, so SFP, I suppose, is a must for me. If you have 1:10 scope, I personally see it as a waste if it was an SFP instead of FFP. I think you and I agree. Look, so this is one of those things. If it doesn't work with your eyes, it doesn't work with your eyes. I'm curious why it doesn't work with your eyes, and if my guess is correct, I can make a reticle. I can make a front focal plane reticle to work for you and do everything that needs to be done, but I don't make scopes, right? So if of the stuff out there in the market, this did not work, and you found something that works for you, great, you're set, right? You know, persist with that. Okay. LPVO FFP just doesn't work with my eyes, unfortunately. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Look, you tried it, it doesn't. Good. How is the quality of the Delta Horde to the Striker? Close. I hope it will be better than the primary arms 1:8 ACSS Chinese scope. Striker is a step up from Hornet. Like I said, I had them side by side. Striker is a better scope. Striker is a Japanese light optics works made design. It's a little bit easier to get behind. The reticle illumination is bright. Hornet illumination is not as bright. Mechanically, it is quite robust. Optically, I think it's very good for the money. It reminds me a little bit of the Burris RT6, maybe a little bit improved. Both are made in the Philippines, so I would not be surprised if it's the same OEM or not. I'm not sure exactly which company makes it. But there is a reason why the Striker, is approximately double the price of the Hornet. Both compete really well in their price ranges, but if you have $800 to spend, get the Striker. The Hornet is not going to do everything you need. Now, on the other hand, if you want to use the reticle for wind, with Striker it gets a little bit trickier because of how the reticle is done, and the Hornet does have that. So for some use cases, it may be a better scope. But optically, optomechanically, Striker is better. Okay. How does it compare to the primary arms 1:8 ACSS Chinese scope? Haven't seen one in a little bit. I think the Hornet is a little bit better, but I don't know what to tell you. Without seeing stuff side by side, I'm guessing. The earlier primary arm stuff, just like the Strike Eagles and all that, I really did not like. But right now, I mean, I have some like the prismatic over there and some other stuff from primary arms, and it's very, very competent. So as the models get changed, I have to be careful making too many conclusions based on the earlier designs that I have seen. I understand the ACSS really well. I'll have to go back and look at your video on the Hornet with the D2BR to get familiar with how it works. Yeah, it's take a look. If you have questions, tell me. It's just a BDC reticle with wind holes. That's pretty much it. I tried to make it as simple and unintrusive as I could. Okay. Just want a better scope than a typical ACSS Chinese scope. So Chinese scopes are getting a lot better. As impressed I am with some of the recent primary arms designs. Their earlier low power variables were not great. Well, none of the Chinese ones were great. Now there are better ones coming out, and the latest from primary arms might be one of those better ones for right now. The Chinese OEMs are getting a lot better. Hi Ilya, again, great info knowledge. I'm new to scopes, still learning. A one-piece scope mounts better than separate rings. I was looking at the LaRue SPR LT139. So there are two things here. If you are putting a scope on an AR-15, unless it's some sort of ultralight setup or something like that, use a one-piece mount. Generally, high-quality one-piece mount is better. It's not applicable to all guns, all applications, that kind of stuff, but it's a better way to go. LaRue mounts I don't like. So SPR LT139, let me see what that is. I think it's the vertical rings, forward extended with their levers, right? Yeah. You can, a lot of these out there, I don't recommend it. So there are a couple of problems with this design. One, so LaRue generally makes good stuff, and they're very opinionated, and they have their fanboys who will murder you if you disagree. So my life might be in danger from what I'm about to say. Vertically split rings is generally a bad idea. And the problem is that with some scopes, they work okay, and with some not so well. And I would not do a ring of this type on any scope that you might be dialing. Okay. And another thing I don't like about LaRue mounts is that the way they design the levers over time, it chews up your rail. If you're going to be removing it a lot, it's going to chew up your rail. And if you're not going to be removing it a lot, then why do you need the levers at all? The normal, normal half inch or whatever, these nuts, they work better, right? So is this mount a good general purpose option? No, I don't think so. I don't think it's maybe some applications where it works fine. It's been around for a long time. LaRue supports their stuff well. I think you can do notably better for the money. The mount on my Striker is a Geissele. There are Badger mounts that are less expensive, some more expensive, some less expensive, that are very good. If you're putting on an AR-15, LaRue is not where I would go. Okay. Joe, invest in ammo. That's good luck finding any. I'm not sure if I want to buy ammo at current prices. I'm somewhat well stocked. I think I'm going to wait it out. I don't want to overpay that much. Another mount question. Are the dovetails ever preferred over Picatinny mounts? The simple, I'm not sure which dovetails you're talking about. If it's a double dovetail ring or something like that, the simple answer is no. Just don't do it. Most of the world is sort of standardizing on what is quote unquote are Picatinny. Picatinny mounts, although the standard I prefer, although it looks the same as something called Stanag for 539, something like that. And given a choice, I would just go normal Picatinny mounts and be done with it. I did a video on mount recommendations, and a lot of these questions are covered there. So take a look. Tell me if that answers your questions. Okay. I adjusted my Razor 3 to be crystal clear at 1x, but have to deal with reticle distortion at longer distances. Would sending it to the factory to get a parallax adjustment fix the issue? Quite possibly, right? So when you adjusted it, did you adjust it on 1x to be true 1x? Because that kind of makes a difference. Just to be crystal clear is not necessarily the same as true 1x, but it is possible that there's an issue. These scopes are hard to build, and there's quite a lot of them out there now. There are very few returns, so they've kind of got the manufacturing process down, but it's possible that yours slipped through the cracks. They can get it resolved. Vertical rings are an ass pain trying to get the scope straight from cant when tightening screws. I don't care for them. Yes, that is true, but that is the least of your problems. The way vertical rings are designed is that as you're tightening them, these vertical halves, they actually deflect, they change their radius. And when that happens, the way they clamp the tube is not even. Like you want the scope to be evenly contacting the tube. And what happens with these, they're just squeezing it from the sides. And the scope wall tubes deform a little bit, and they can have interesting effects on whatever is inside, in this case, the erector assembly system. When that happens, you can have weird results. The adjustments can go wrong if it's a adjustable parallax. Parallax can bind, or adjustments can have a limited range, or the scope can shift zero if you squeeze it a little bit more, a little bit less. You can have weird things. So can you make vertical split rings work? Yeah, clearly. A bunch of people used them for quite a long time and worked fine. But also, I wonder how many times, well, I don't have to wonder, I have an idea, how many times people were chasing wandering zero, sent the scope to a gunsmith set it up on his own rings, and it worked fine. And the difference was one was vertically split rings, and other stiff horizontal split rings, right? Don't bring extra problems on your neck that you don't need to have, right? Bill, thank you for watching. Almost 3,000 subscribers. You guys have no idea how much I appreciate this. This has been a blast. I've really enjoyed it. I think we'll hit 3,000 in a couple of weeks, thereabouts. Given that I'm sort of a nerdy technical guy, the fact that there's 3,000 people interested in listening to my ramblings, well, I am very grateful and very surprised. You people are strange. My kind of strange. All right. I ran out of questions. What else comes to mind, people? Anything about LPVOs, scopes, tripods, knives? I'm going to do another couple of knife videos. I'm planning a couple of things, but that's probably not the topic of the day here. Let's see, I had some reticle pictures. Since nobody is asking questions, let me see if I can pull something up to kind of show you the difference in side picture. Let me see. There we go. So I'm going to share the screen. Okay. I do have a couple of questions, then I'll go into the pictures. Is Delta coming out with any prism scopes or anything else? Yeah, so they have a 1 power and a 3 power prism scopes that I think they're already out. I have not tested them. I've seen a prototype of one a while back, but I have not seen the final production version. So I don't have any opinions. I think Edgun West has either one or both of them listed already, but they do have prismatics, and the prototype looked pretty decent. I was wondering if anybody would say that yes, it's exactly what it is. I didn't finish it last time, so this is just the remnants. Mr. R. Full of It, please shoot me an email at swag@darklordofoptics.com. Give me your address and the t-shirt size you want, and I will send you a t-shirt. We have a winner. Okay, more questions. Good. What are your thoughts on the Swarovski Z5 versus Leupold VX5 in terms of glass repeatability, durability? You know, in terms of repeatability and durability, I've had good luck with both scopes. I like the Z5 and I like the VX5. Optically, Z5 is better, but VX5 is no slouch. So the way it sort of goes with my hunting scope recommendations, and they're not exactly the same price, right? Once you get to $1,000 or thereabouts, to about $1,000 or in the ballpark, I really like to have my reticles with illumination, because in low light, looking into dark timber, that kind of stuff, it really makes a difference. Being able to see the aiming point is really, really critical. Z5 now has finally introduced a couple of scopes with illuminated reticles, I think, and the one I really liked was the 2.4 to 12 by 50, and that's an illuminated reticle scope. And for what they're charging for the money, it's probably easily one of the better hunting scopes in that price range. However, for a lot of different hunting applications, would I take Z5 is better optically, but I'm not convinced I would take a non-illuminated Z5 over illuminated VX5, right? And then it also comes down to what kind of configuration you want. For example, if you're looking at the 2 to 10 by 40 scope, VX5 with the illuminated reticle and everything is really nice. Fairly trim scope, good optically, seems to be good mechanically. I really like Leupold's new turrets, and the reticle is illuminated. However, once you go up to the 3 to 15, there's more competition there, most prominent being Vortex Razor HDL-HT 3 to 15 by 42, and 3 to 15 by 50. And while there's not a big difference, I think the center optical performance is a little bit better than the Leupold, right? So the 2 to 10, I like the Leupold. The 3 to 15, I like the Razor HDL-HT. And if you have more money to spend, I think Z5 illuminated is excellent, just excellent. Okay. We now have multiple manufacturers offering 1 to 10 power optics. What's the next big thing for LPVOs? I think for a little bit, so there are already 1 to 12 prototypes around. I haven't seen anything production ready yet, but I'm sure it's coming. The catch is that the fact that there are multiple manufacturers of 1 to 10 rifle scopes doesn't mean that they're all good 1 to 10 rifle scopes. I've seen some that were good and some that were absolute crap. I think for a little bit, we will see a little bit more refinement in 1 to 8 and 1 to 10 scopes with good reticle illumination coming in, more development on the reticles, trying to make the scopes a little bit trimmer and stuff like that. Honestly, what I would like to see, and I've talked to several manufacturers about it, I really want one. I would like them to scale back a little bit and make, let's say, 1 to 4 or 1 to 5. That's as small as humanly possible, right? If to give you an idea, right? So this is a perfectly conventional, high-quality Japanese 1-6. This is a top-end Japanese 1-10. See how much shorter it is? What if one of them, and Leupold would actually be a good option. They're good at making stuff that's small and light. What if one of them focused and tried to make as short as humanly possible 1-5 by 20 scope with a nice brightly illuminated dot that's, I don't know, 6.5 inches long and weighs 11 ounces? Is it easy to do? No. Is it possible? Maybe. And I would, for a lot of the different low power variable applications, I would buy that. I think that's missing. So we'll see what happens, right? But we are at a point where I'm not convinced I'm all that interested in the 1-12, 1-14, or whatever else they come up with. But I'm really interested in seeing how small they can go, having learned on these complicated 1-10 scopes. How much smaller can they make a 1-4, 1-5 low power variable? I hope they look into that. Okay. I bought a Scallywag Tactical Privateer folder for half off blemish. Nice. That's a nice knife. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, you won a t-shirt fair and square. I did not make it difficult for you guys today. I wasn't trying to. Next live cast, it's not going to be so simple. Yeah, I actually, so Bill is asking a question. Have you heard of the new Steiner red dot with thermal integrated, the Steiner CQT? If I'm not mistaken. Sounds interesting, but way too expensive. Yes, I actually still have one here. I was supposed to return it to Steiner toward the end of December, I think, and then I got COVID and I was down. I'm almost done with it. I'm going to have a video on it up fairly soon. It is very expensive. It is absolutely remarkable. I mean, if you want a close quarter capable, truly general purpose, day, night, any illumination sighting device, this is the best I've seen. It's absolutely remarkable. Okay. Yeah. I was thinking about doing a live cast on it, but I might just do it as a regular video. We'll see. Maybe I'll do a live cast. I don't know. If I can set up to do a live cast outdoors so that you could see things with thermal and day, maybe I'll do it that way. Lee's asking, any opinion on the Athlon Ares BTR Gen 2 versus Gen 1? Also, how does the Gen 2 compare to the Viper PST Gen 2 line? So I have a lot of mileage with the BTR Gen 1 and a little bit with BTR Gen 2. A lot of mileage with every PST of every generation. I think Gen 2 was a solid step up. I think the higher magnification one is broadly comparable to the 5-25 PST Gen 2. The PST does have wider field of view, which is nice. So it's a little bit easier to get behind. It's a more pleasing image in terms of pure optical performance. The BTR Gen 2 is easily comparable. Between the 2.5 to 15 Ares and the 3 to 15 PST Gen 2, I think the 3 to 15 is a better scope. That's kind of the best one in the PST Gen 2 lineup. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for, what reticles you like. These are broadly comparable designs, but I think the way the PST Gen 2 is set up with a wider eyepiece and all that, it's slightly warm image. It's a very pleasing, it's a very easy scope to use. Between the Ares BTR Gen 2 and Gen 1, I thought Gen 2 was a good step up. It's a nice design. The visual fields of these high-power LPVOs are not great, like iBox, iRelief, etc. That's the very, the 1-12 and all those. Yeah, that's correct. So making a rifle scope with an erector ratio that high, meaning the ratio of magnifications, is tricky. And if the iBox is tight on top power, I don't care too much. I expect it to be, right? But what happens is that when you stretch it that much, you compromise the performance on one power as well. And that is kind of a problem. You can go to a Chinese OEM and tell them I want the 1-14, and they'll make one for you. it doesn't mean it's going to work well in all magnifications, right? For example, one of the problems that people don't talk about too much is that in the front focal plane rifle scope with the high rector ratio, there will be one or two or more different magnification where the reticle goes blurry, right? Because you're making that much of a magnification ratio, a lot of things sacrificed, and the image is going to go blurry, and everything is going to be out of whack. So you have to be really careful with how you do this. There are several Chinese 1-10 rifle scopes, and optomechanically, the only good one that I've seen is the Swamp Fox Arrowhead 1-10 by 24, which is a second focal plane design. I've seen the Atibal and a similar JRC. Optomechanically, I didn't like that design. Turns didn't track. There were optical issues. Illumination had issues. With the Atibal reticle, I think it was completely mismatched. With the GRC reticle, it works. Because the reticle kind of matches the scope, and then you don't need to use the turret. There's a learning curve. It's a somewhat busy reticle, but it does work. I mean, I've shot it. I know the guy who created it, and it works fine. But optomechanically, it's not a great scope. I'm sure they'll get better, but I'm kind of waiting. I think a 1-12 scope is great for marketing to people who don't know what they're looking at. Right, it's not doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a great scope. So I'm expecting more optimization for now than anything else. I waylaid and missed the earlier conversation. Question: how far can you make PID with a 10 power LPVO? It depends on what you're looking at and which LPVO, right? I mean, for example, with the 1-10 Razor, 1-10 March, I can shoot with adequate comfort to 1,000, 1,200 yards on typical metal plates, and I can see them, right, without any real issues. How far away can I tell a difference between a dog and a coyote? That depends, but maybe 400 or 500 yards or thereabouts, maybe a little bit more, depending on lighting conditions and things like that. How far away can I make a difference? Can I tell a difference between a cow and a deer? Probably 1,000 yards or thereabouts. It depends on your eyes. It depends on the specific scope. It depends on the lighting conditions. But for all practical purposes, in decent light, I can comfortably figure out whether I need to be shooting at something or not shooting at something out to 600 to 1,000 yards, depending on what exactly I'm looking at. Round was probably written on the side. No, it does not say anything on anything. And the man who won a t-shirt today, I figured if it was good once, it would be good twice. Yeah, it was. In this case, I didn't finish it last time, so that's what was in the flask. Now I pour out the rest of it, so next week it's going to be something else. What are your thoughts on the Holosun red dot with the ACSS reticle? All of the YouTubers I've seen have a good opinion. What do you think? So I have a couple of them here, and one ACSS reticle red dot. It's not Holosun. It is somewhere here. Okay. So this is a non-Holosun red dot from Primary Arms with their ACSS. There we go. Is it? I think it is. Yeah, it is. And I have their pistol red dot with the new ACSS Vulcan reticle. This is a Holosun. And I have another one, the conventional tube one that looks like 8-point micro called the Parallel with the ACSS reticle. You know what? I really like them. I don't have any sort of a relationship with Holosun. They don't know me from Adam. And every time I go talk to them at SHOT, I don't think there's anybody ever in their booth who has ever fired the gun, so nothing ever happens. But I'm friendly with the guys at Primary Arms. So I look at the designs. They work really well. So to me, the biggest value of the conventional ACSS reticle is when the red dot sight is really combined with a magnifier. For typical red dot appropriate distances, a simple dot like an 8-point or anything like that is perfectly fine for me, or the EOTech circle of death, that kind of stuff. For distances where I can easily shoot without magnification, I don't need all that much holdover or anything like that, right? That's not what the dots are for. And I have mild astigmatism, so all of these holdover hash marks are not as sharp as they need to be anyway. I don't have perfect vision. However, the moment you add a magnifier, like SIG Juliet 4, I think it's probably the only a magnifier in the market that's actually assembled in the US. Excuse me, which is kind of nice. Or the 8-point micro, I have a Vortex Micro 3X, so I have an 8.6X magnifier as well. The moment you add a magnifier to it and you extend the distance, an ACSS reticle or any other reticle that allows holdovers and things like that really make all the difference in the world. Okay. How well does the horseshoe versus the dot work for me up close? It doesn't seem to be make that much difference. However, what this horseshoe in the ACSS reticle does for primary arms, it allows them to make the center point, like a chevron, fairly sharp. They don't need a very big dot there. So once you want a little bit more precision, and in my case, it's with the magnifier, that works really well. So if you're going to run a magnifier, it's definitely a good idea. I like the reticle designs. If you're not going to add a magnifier, I don't know, right? It doesn't hurt. I mean, there's no real downside. It seems to work quite nicely and quite quickly for me. But options open up. And a lot of people just prefer a nice simple dot, and that's it. Okay. Mr. Lee Tintle is going to sleep. Good night, sir. Always a pleasure having you. Thank you for the questions. Really appreciate it. Mr. Pew Pew, that's why I would say once you need more magnification, just get away from LPVO and go straight standard FFP scopes. Yeah, there is a lot of value in that, right? It just depends on how much do you need that 1 power. If you need for 1 power for up close, can be adequately satisfied by an offset red dot sight or piggybacked like I have in a little SWFA ultralight. And if you spend most of your time on higher magnifications, don't do low power variable. Get a more conventional scope. High magnification will work better there. Larger objectives help there and stuff like that. Okay. The only reason to stick with a low power variable if you do need that 1 power through the scope, if the auxiliary red dot sight doesn't do it enough for you. Honestly, one of the reasons that I like, even with high magnification scopes, one of the reasons I like to have an illuminated dot, illuminated reticle, where not the whole thing illuminated, just something in the center, is that I've used an occluded eye gun sight a fair bit, and Trigicons, or Alcans in my case. The naming concept works fine for me. If I want to go fast with a gun that has a conventional scope on it, as long as there is a reasonably bright illuminated reticle, I can close the cap on the objective so you can't see through the scope, and I can run with both eyes, right? And that becomes an occluded eye gun sight. While it's not ideal, it works just fine for me at close distances, hit center of man very comfortably. Okay. How do you like the Minox ZP8 MR10 Plus reticle? I actually like it quite a bit. It was the first one of this type. I think it was the first one that had kind of a tree grid type design and a low power variable, that's front focal plane. And it's still works well. It stood the test of time. It's a very functional reticle. I think Minox did a very good job with it. I was interested in revisiting it, so I sent them an email. I haven't heard anything back. But with COVID, who knows what's happening. I'd like to revisit that scope again. What was I? Real issues. Your thoughts on the Vortex Viper PST Gen 2 1-6, also best LPVO optic under $800 US. So I like the PST Gen 2 1-6 quite a bit. It's sort of like a mini razor. Dot is not quite as bright, but it's bright. Field of view is nice and wide. It's a very, very nice scope. It would quite possibly be the best scope of this type under $800 if Delta didn't underprice their Japanese Striker HD 1-6x24, this guy that I keep on bringing up. I think you can pick it up for about $750, and this is hands down the best value in the low power variable scopes under 1,000 right now. Delta Striker HD 1-6x24. Day bright reticle, nice Japanese scope, easy to get behind, fairly lightweight. It's just a really nice package. Ram, stealing alcohol off of dead Caribbean pirates. How Russian of you? Well, a lot of the Russians can do a lot of things for alcohol, right? No, I like nice rum. I like nice scotches. I like nice cognacs. I don't drink vodka. I don't drink tequila. I don't drink anything made out of licorice, although Jagermeisters and all that nonsense. But I like good stuff. I really like nice bourbons. I'm getting into a lot of really expensive stuff. I think one of the reasons I have not become an alcoholic is that the stuff I drink is really expensive and I just can't afford to. But I enjoy every sip. Okay. I had to leave. Did you get to my question regarding the March versus Vortex? Yeah, I actually did. This is going to be a video on YouTube. Please look through it. I did cover it. And if something is not clear, ask in the comments or on my website, darklordofoptics.com, and I'll do my best to answer. So just to be sure, either darklordofoptics.com or darklordofoptics.locals.com will get you to my website. Okay, Mr. T-shirt is asking. You realize from now on you're going to be Mr. T-shirt, right? I have astigmatism and noticed with scope elimination bright it would smear, but I could adjust most or all out with diopter. Is that a good way to fine-tune reticle focus? Yes. So the diopter adjustment on the rifle scope, meaning this thing here, like this thing here, this exists for one purpose and one purpose only: to get the reticle worked out correctly for your eye. Now, on low power variables, while you're at it, you also have to kind of make sure it's very close to true 1x, right? Because if you're way off, you can have 0.8 magnification or 1.2 or something like that. Well, the way it happens, if there's nothing wrong with the scope and you adjust it correctly, the reticle is going to be sharp, and you're going to be on true 1 power. Okay, so that actually makes a big difference. Any other recommendations for lightweight LPVOs? Not too many. And there are not too many lightweight LPVOs that truly start in 1 power. So Leupold has the legacy 1.5 to 4 and 1.5 to 5 designs. And they're quite good, but they're not true 1 power. They are more of lightweight hunting scopes, although they've tried to shoehorn them into this AR role. And there's a big difference between 1 and 1.5 power. And I hope to introduce something lightweight. They were supposed to introduce a Mark V this year, but I haven't seen it yet. They're definitely capable of it. There is not a ton. That's lightweight and good with low power variables. Let me think. Like I said, Steiner P4XI, Delta Striker, Delta Hornet is quite good. Leopold VX6 HD 126 is comparatively lightweight. What else? There's not a ton. Once you get close to 20 ounces, there are a few more options like the Razor Gen3 and Gen2E and a few others here and there. But a lot of LPVOs are in the 22 to 26 ounce range. And then by the time you add a nice single piece mount, you can be easily adding a 2-pound optics package to a 6-pound gun. It makes a big difference. One of the reasons why, like I said, think about the application, think about what you're going to put it on. All my really lightweight ARs that are not designed to stretch the distance don't have LPVOs. As much as I like this scope type, on guns that are truly light, I tend to go with a lighter weight solution, either prismatic or a red dot with a magnifier and a quick detachable mounts, stuff like that. There used to be more hunting type lightweight LPVOs that I was hoping would get some development, but they just got discontinued and replaced with stuff that's heavier. Thank you. I'll go back and find it. Thanks for your content. Thank you for the question. It was a good question. And all this stuff that I do here comes out of the questions you guys ask. So please continue asking them. Have you seen the B&T VP69 weird suppressed bolt action handgun? I have not. No. Interesting. I'll look it up. I'm curious now. PPU and Crunch. What is in the works in the future? Do you mean in terms of what I'm working on? Well, some of the stuff you see here that I'm going to be working through. I have several Guns and M articles I need to write. And there is a very interesting scope coming my way fairly soon, but I can't talk about it until probably sometime in April when it comes out. So that will be interesting. So the things that I'm going to do next, I need to finish with the Steiner CQT and send it back or they're going to kill me. It's a very expensive site that I'm holding hostage. That's that integrated thermal and red dot combination. I need to wrap up with the second Leica PRS scope I have here and Leica Tempest. That's largely done. I just need to take a couple more pictures and stuff like that. Leica Tempest red dot is very nice, by the way. And I need to do a video on the 2 US optics scopes I have, the FDL17X and the TS12X, which I actually liked. So these are probably next, other than some Guns and Ammo stuff. But there is a lag between I finish the Guns and Ammo stuff and when you guys see it. So we'll see. We'll see where that takes us. Okay. So that's next on my list, and I want to look more carefully into made in the US optics. It's one of the reasons I decided to look at the SIG because it is assembled in the US. SIG is one of the few companies that was able to bring in some of the assembly manufacturing back to the US, and the Juliet 4 magnifier also assembled in the US, and the Romeo 4T red dot that's coming fairly soon also is. So I want to look at that. And as I said earlier, I'm looking at these gun vises, gun cradles. I am curious. I'm going to be looking at that. Okay. Keltec P50. What are your thoughts? I want one, but given the current shortages and demands and stuff, if I stumble on one, I'll buy it. But for now, I can wait. I saw a deal on a Riton X7 128 FFP. They were going for around 600. Seems to be a Japanese glass, perhaps from the Light Optics Works factory. Do you have any experience with Riton optics? So I don't have too much experience with Riton. It's another company that I just didn't see eye to eye with. So I've seen them a little bit. I haven't seen too much. It's not Light Optics Works. It's from a company called Japan Optics Limited, from a Hako. They used to be not great, but last 2 3 years, they seem to have stepped up with some really nice designs. That particular 128 by 28, I didn't like too much. The couple samples that I've seen were not great on 1 power. But I've also talked to a couple of people who didn't have any of those issues, so perhaps I saw them from a bad batch. 600 is probably a pretty good price. I don't recall illumination being particularly bright. But mechanically, I think these are fairly robust scopes. But I don't have enough experience with them to make too many recommendations. The two that I have seen briefly had some issues on 1 power that I could not dial out with the eyepiece, so kind of moved on. Oh, by the way, Reticle is another company. I think they have a scope that they make in the US. I don't know if it's with foreign parts or made from scratch here. I'm not sure, but good for them. Bringing back some manufacturing back in here. And I remember you said you were making a video about the Kel-Tec CP33. When can we expect it? Hopefully fairly soon. So what happened with the CP33, it just has these weird magazines that are quad stack. And I was having all sorts of feeding and reliability issues and all that. And during one of my data range videos, I decided to show how it's jamming. Loaded up a magazine, 33 rounds, and had one failure to fire, which happens with rimfires, and everything else worked fine. So perhaps it's breaking in. I was about ready to make a video, but then it started working. So I would just want to put more rounds through it before I make any conclusions. So it's coming, but not as quickly as I thought it would, because I want to give it a fair shake. It's been working great since, and I really like that. I really like that pistol now. Maybe I learned how to load it correctly. I don't know, but I need more rounds through it before I render judgment. I see the military moving away from 556 DMR and going to really short 16-inch barrel 308 rifles with LPVOs, abandoning the Knights and Mountain. Yes. So that's the SDMR project, and this SIG Tango 6 is the exact scope that won that. And this reticle that I have is exactly for that. It's supposed to be 16-inch barrel 308, but the ballistics that this reticle is designed for look odd to me. They match 175 grain Sierra Match King, launching at about 2450 foot per second, which is a little bit slow for 16-inch barrel, I think. But maybe I'm miscalculating something. I generally am on board with that, although I would. To me, for DMR type thing, I would think that something like 6mm arc would be a really interesting option. And I know the military uses that a little bit. 308 does lose some potency out of the shorter barrels, but I will, and it's it's a slightly more unwieldy rifle. But there are nice ones out there like the HK that won the competition, or the SIG 716 G2, really nice gun, and there are a few others. From the standpoint of terminal exterior ballistics, and more importantly terminal ballistics, going a little bit bigger is not a bad idea. I think it's a worthwhile change. It complicates logistics a little bit. Now you have a second caliber, but 308 is already in the military procurement system, so it shouldn't be too bad. Oh, Mahmoud, what is next for the scopes in a 5-30 by 56 range? I don't know. I think this range right now is super saturated. There are so many competent designs from $1,000 to $5,000. So I don't know what's really next. The biggest thing I see for scopes of this type is things like Ravik or Steiner IFS, where you get integrated ballistic computer that helps you never look away from the scope. I think that's the next step, but for now, that's expensive. Optomechanically, I honestly don't know. That's not the category where I see a lot of development, because the stuff that's there now is really good, and I think a lot of the progress we will see will be with electronics, not so much with optics. At least that's my best guess, but we'll see how it goes. Yes, they do. I've never seen it live. I just saw the posting on the website. It's like $1,800, something like that. I know nothing about the scope, but I applaud them for doing something in the US. They are in Tucson, Arizona, I think. Rex reviews supports right on optics. Oops, take a drink. You suck. For those new here, long story. Hope Vortex increases the AMG US made line. The UH1 Gen 2 might be my next purchase. I have both UH1s, the Gen 1 and Gen 2, and I really like them. If you're looking for a holographic, this is a good option. It's a good design, it's a good sight, hasn't given me any issues. I've made a good faith effort to break it, didn't break. Didn't give me any trouble, works well, works great with magnifiers. Yeah. As far as expanding the AMG line, I honestly don't know. So you have to keep in mind, Vortex is capable of manufacturing stuff here and does a very good job with it. I've been to their facility; it's huge, lots of labs, and they had extra manufacturing space. But they are also increasingly bidding more and more on various military contracts for ever more sophisticated options, and they were one of the companies that won the next step for this, squad automatic optic, which is really interesting, 1:8 FFP with integrated electronic generated projected reticle and all sorts of other fun stuff. The military stuff would have to be manufactured here. So if they win some military contracts, I don't know if the US production capacity is going to go for more civilian stuff or if it's going to go for more military stuff, or both. I have no insight. But they definitely have the know-how and the space and the resources to do it. The question is, in the civilian market, how much market is there really for US-made optics? Because it is expensive to make stuff here. So whatever they make here would have to be comparatively high-end stuff, and how big is the market there? Hard to say. But if you win a military contract, there are margins there, right? So, but whatever you do for the military might spill over in what you do for civilians. We'll see. Next 2-3 years will show. So it's a complicated question. I am well familiar with the Swamp Fox product line, partly because it's smaller product line. And the question, are they good, is not a good question. The good question is, are they good for the money? And that I can say yes. Okay. Primary Arms has a much more extensive product line, and I'm not entirely up to speed on all of it. For example, they have silver, gold, and platinum scopes, right? Platinum scopes is good. Gold, from what I've seen, is mostly good. Like, I haven't seen any major issues, but I'm not hugely well familiar with it. Silver, their lower end line, there's good number of products there, and they change comparatively rapidly, so I'm really not up to speed. So the only thing from their silver product line that I have somewhere in this mess is that red dot that I don't see right now with the ACSS reticle. Mother of... I don't know what I did. It's here somewhere. It's probably going to disappear like the Razor Gen3. And it's quite nice. I'm really impressed with it. It's inexpensive and it's good. And but for their low power variables, I don't know. The early ones I did not like. I don't know how the current ones are. But to Primary Arms credit, every time I see a next generation product, it gets better. I'm really, really, really impressed with their 2-power prismatic, and they have a really interesting 1-power prismatic, completely different optical system coming out. I should have it here fairly soon. For a lot of people, it might replace a red dot. I think we'll see. Okay, so unfortunately, there's no simple blanket answer. Looking for an offset for a precision rifle in AR, have mild astigmatism. My aim.22 gave me a bit of starburst pattern and mini red dots that are astigmatism friendly. So it depends on your astigmatism, right? Some are more friendly than others. Also, the way your brain processes images, if it has a shape to see rather than just a dot, it will often play a little bit better with astigmatism. If you just want a dot of the compact red dot sights, probably the best dot collimation that I've seen is Leica Tempus. But honestly, so this new Holosun, they designed it for handguns, but it'll work on a rifle as an offset just fine. It fits an RMR mounting pattern. It's a, what's the model number? It's the one with their ACSS Vulcan reticle. Hold on, I'll tell you the model number. I have the box here somewhere. Okay. So the model number is 507C2 ACSS. It's the Vulcan reticle. The way the reticle works is just a center chevron and a huge circle around it. It's designed for pistols. I'll do a video on that at a later point. I don't see why it wouldn't work as an offset on a rifle as well. And it seems, I have mild astigmatism and it seems to play fairly well with it. So for compact red dot sights, I'd look at this one and I'd look at the Leica Tempus. With slightly bigger ones, so this one, it's I think they still make it. It's a Crimson Trace CTS 1400, but it's a little bit bigger. You can still use it. You know, it's not bigger than an 8-point micro really. You can use it as an offset one. It's a Japanese-made sight. I don't know for sure if they still make it. This dot plays pretty well with my eyes, so it's slightly distorted, but it's not a starburst. Unfortunately, everyone's astigmatism is a little bit different, so you kind of have to look at a few of them. Give it a shot. Okay. Any thoughts on the tracked toric PRS 4-20 FFP scopes for NRL22? Would be any other comparable scopes you'd prefer with similar price and specs? Close parallax, lightweight, zero stop FFP. Yeah, toric is a very good option. The only weakness for the toric is that the field of view is a little bit narrow. For a little bit more money, around $1,500, there is Element Nexus 5-20 by 50 that has excellent close focus, good reticle, and wider field of view. Is slightly easier to get behind. I think toric is about $1,200, $1,250. Element Nexus 5-20 is about $1,500. Both are very good scopes, and both would be somewhere toward the top of my list, I think. Going down to below 1K, the number of options increases in some ways, but they're not going to be Japanese anymore. If you want a Japanese scope, these are your good options, really. At 1,000, there's a Brownells MPO 3-18 by 50. I think it focuses down to 25 yards. I don't remember for sure, but I think it does. It's actually a very competent design. Optically, it's slightly less good, I think, than the toric and the Element, but still very good. And the reticle works better at low power, and there's a broader magnification range. So it kind of depends. As you go for a little bit further down in price, there are other options. The optic are not quite as nice, but there is the Meopta, 5-30 by 56, Meopta Optica 6, and a few others that are indeed very nice. But if you want a Japanese scope, I'd look at the toric and I'd look at the Nexus Element. Okay, my friend has an FN AR-15 DMR 18-inch and wants to get an optic under 1K. I'm suggesting a 2.5 to 10, maybe Trijic and Credo, the EOTech Voodoo. Any recommendations? So both are pretty good options. Kind of depends on how much weight he's looking to put up with and stuff like that. Both of these are not lightweight, right? But both are nice Japanese scopes. So under 1K, honestly, the Vortex PST Gen 2 3-15 by 44 is a really nice option. Get that, set it up with an offset red dot. It'll be good. Optically, is it as good as the Japanese ones? Maybe, maybe not, but it's close. It's really nice. I'm really impressed with it. And it's about $800, I think. It has a good 3D reticle. It's front focal plane. Well, there's front focal and second focal plane versions. Available front focal plane. Reticle, nice field of view. Tracks. Not same basic weight range, but it goes from 3-15. So if you want to reach out there, 10 is nice, 15 is a little better, and you're not sacrificing a ton on the low end. 2.5 to 10 optics have their place, but my basic problem with most 2.5 to 10 optics is that they tend to be, what's out there right now tends to be heavier than I like. And if you're putting up with that much weight, then 3-15 might give you a little bit more flexibility, I think. Also under 1K, there is a Meopta Optica 6 3-18 by 50. It's a pretty decent scope as well. I'm biased. I designed the reticle for it. The MRAD one is mine, but I designed it to be functional from 3-18 and across the entire magnification range. But it is heavier than the PST Gen 2 3-15 by 44. The PST Gen 2 is sufficiently good where for the scope of this type, it's my almost default recommendation for anything under $1,000, under $1,200 or thereabouts. It's just a package that comes well together. I would not overlook it. It's a Philippine-made scope, but it's a very nice scope. Wow. I hope that didn't make it to the microphone. Mr. Singh, I have both and they're good. Also on a Vortex PST and the Razor, I can tell you the Razor and PST glass and side picture are on another level. Yeah, that was a response to an earlier question. Yes, Mr. Poop, you knew that this Holosun in my hand is a 507. You were absolutely correct. Yeah, I speak to quite a few guys. You see them chime in here and there to Slav Guns and Northwest Gun Reviewers. He was here earlier. Oh yeah, he's posting further, and I speak to Cyclops Joe occasionally, and a few other people here and there. The whole GunTube community is kind of an interesting community. I run into a lot of interesting people that are fun to hang out with. We were planning a big get together during SHOT Show this year, and the whole thing got canceled. So maybe next year. Maybe for the King of 2 Miles, if it happens, it's going to be in Raton, New Mexico, not too far from here. Maybe I'll have these guys fly into Albuquerque, where I live, and we'll be able to, hang out a little bit and go to the long-range competition together. I'm not going to compete. I just want to watch, but some of these guys might compete. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for good questions. And speaking of YouTube gun bloggers, well, here's one of them, right? Mr. Northwest Gun Reviewers, Derek. Derek is a good dude, good shot, and a pretty good gunsmith. So if you guys are looking to build a rifle, I recommend talking to him. I am there. Okay, Derek is shopping for a ticket to Albuquerque. Have you got the chance to use the Holosun 512C, the closed emitter? I have used it, but not excessively. Holosun generally makes good stuff. Holosun, the red dot sight and stuff like that, it's a subsidiary of a larger semiconductor company. So a lot of the light emitting diodes, lasers, a lot of the things they use in their sites, the larger company makes themselves. They do a lot of innovation there. So they are, they're an interesting company. They make good stuff. The quality I think, is quite decent. I have not been big on Holosun, and they're not the only good red dot manufacturer in China, but Holosun, the stuff that I've seen, the product was good. Mr. Guns and Tactics, I will have to admit I have not seen your channel. I will absolutely take a look. Thank you for joining in on the livecast. I think I haven't seen your channel. I'm getting old. There's so much stuff out there that I am not as good at paying attention as I used to be, but there are a few that I watch. Okay. Same here in Guns and Tactics. All right. Okay, where are we? We are at about 2.5 hours. Not bad. People on the East Coast are already asleep. Still have a good audience. If you guys have more questions, now's the time. So before I got this latest barrage of questions, I was going to pull up. I had a good number of questions about Delta Striker 126. So it's a second focal plane scope. And I'm going to pull up a couple of reticle through the scope pictures that I did. They're also all, I think, on my Instagram, so that you can see. Let me see. There we go. So what you're looking at is a side picture from the Delta Striker 126. It's at the shooting range. The target 50 yards, 100 yards. I think it's a 50-yard target. Excuse me. And you can see that the dot is bright, and on 6 power, it is delineated in milliradian, right? So every one step is 1 milliradian, and you have wind and you have and drop. And same thing, but on 1 power. So you can see the front sight and suppressor in that case. Okay. The dot is bright. It's a nice fiber dot. The way these work, the fiber comes down usually from underneath. It's hidden behind the wire reticle, and there is a little bit of a polished 45-degree angle, so you get this bright fiber illuminated dot. This illumination technology has a few interesting advantages. One is that there is very little, if any, forward signature, because it's very efficient, right? All the light, virtually all the light that comes out of the fiber ends up coming back to you through the eyepiece, right? But the downside is that you can only illuminate the dot, right? You cannot illuminate any other features, nothing like that. And another downside is because of the physical size of the fiber, I don't think I've ever seen anybody successfully integrate this kind of illumination into a front focal plane reticle, right? But in second focal plane reticle, it works great. So the Delta Striker has this Vortex Razor HD Gen2, has a Gen3 actually has a different illumination. That's front focal plane reticle. But in high quality second focal plane reticle designs, this works really well, right? And in this case, the camera picked it up really well. Camera doesn't always pick it up that well, but this thing on 1 power is stupid fast. It's easy to get behind. Like I said, it's one of the reasons why I recommend this scope as much as I do. Okay, where's my mouse? There we go. Okay. So yeah, wow, look at the illumination, super bright. It is. They did a very, very good job with the illumination. Dark Lord of Optics, Ian Kelby says hi. Oh, that's right. You guys had a video live cast with Ian. I haven't seen him in a while, so I'm friendly with the guys at Kelby. They used to be March importers. That's how I met them, and I've stayed in touch. They're a good family. They're good guys. Ian is a really good dude. They make some of the best actions in the precision world. Really good people. Okay. What else we have? Okay. Bill is trying to bait me to talk about politics. Anything new would like to add about politics? You know, there's a lot of things to say about politics, and this question is too open-ended. I'm happy to voice an opinion. My opinion is very biased by the fact that I grew up in the Soviet Union, so I have a very dim view of socialism, communism, and fascism, and all the other wonderful Soviet attributes. But I'm gonna so every once in a while I'll make a video dedicated to politics, and I'm going to continue talking about them. But when I'm talking about guns, I don't mind talking about politics, but I don't want a specific question. Otherwise, it will devolve into a very long rant again. I use a software called StreamYard. You know what? So let's do this. Let me see. Hold on. Shoot me an email at swag@darklordofoptics.com, and we can talk offline and see how we want to do this. If you just want to try to do something, I can set up a live cast and send you a link, and you can see how the interface works and all that sort of stuff. If you want, you can swing by as a guest on my next live cast, and it'll give you an idea of the interface and all this sort of stuff. Just shoot me an email, and we'll go from there. Is Delta planning increase in their LPVO lineup, perhaps a 1 to 8 or 1 to 10? Undercutting the Vortex 1 to 10 would be nice. Honestly, I don't know, right? So I'm sort of friendly with the guy who owns the company. He's a good dude, and I've designed a couple of reticles for him, but I don't really know that much about his further plans. Doing a 1 to 10 like Razor Gen3 is really tricky because of reticle elimination. Reticle elimination for that scope, and most scopes like that, comes from a Swiss company called IMT that are probably the best at this of anybody out there right now. And that module is expensive, and it's hard to do. I know that there are a couple other companies in Asia, at least one in Japan, and I think one in China, who are trying to develop something similar. The original patents that IMT had on this diffractive reticle elimination have expired. And they expired several years ago. Nobody has yet made the module, elimination module, as good as IMT can. But they're working on it. And once they do, then the price might go down a bit. And that will open things up for somebody to make it cheaper than Vortex, right? Or Nightforce and Schmidt. Now they'll use roughly the same thing. Similar thing, not the same thing, but from the same company called IMT. Miopta uses them. Everybody uses, a lot of people, all the high-end stuff uses them. The big driver of the cost of this thing is elimination. So we'll see. There are interesting designs out there. I mean, if I were to console Delta, whether to go after the 1 to 10, like the Razor Gen3, I don't know. I think there are other niches and applications that can be addressed. Maybe that are not addressed by larger players. So there are certain niches and applications out there that are just too small for a company the size of Vortex to go after. And for smaller manufacturers, I really like it when they, look at the market carefully, not just do the Me Too type of thing. Look at the market carefully, find a niche and address it. The reason why the 1 to 6 Striker has done so well, and they've made it comparatively recently, and it just exploded. There are only a couple of vendors in the US, and they've sold a ton of these. I think they're just flying off the shelves. The big reason is not just the price, although that's a huge thing. It's also the lightest 1 to 6 of its type with a bright dot, right? So the combination of a good quality, bright illuminated dot, and comparatively lightweight is what sells the scope. If you take out any one of these three, it's still a good scope, but it's not going to be quite as good of an overall package, right? So I don't know. I don't know what Delta is planning, but I'm sure they're planning something. TriggerCon. Will TriggerCon happen this year? I don't know. Well, question was for Guns and Tactics. Yeah, I don't know, guys. I've never been to TriggerCon. I'm always curious, but I live in New Mexico, and we're kind of still shut down here, and my kids don't have physical school, so my ability to travel for not for my day job involves travel as well, is somewhat limited. So, Mr. Guns and Tactics, what part of the country are you in? One of the perks of my funky day job is that I enjoy when I fly around meeting people face to face that otherwise I only know through the internet. Okay. So TriggerCon, small show, slower pace, but much more enjoyable. Nice to have the slower pace, see everything, and talk to all folks. Okay. Look, it sounds good. I don't know. If they have it and it's within reach, that would be good to stop by. Home is Pacific Northwest, but you're in Minnesota. Yeah, I go to Oregon once in a while, but with all the crap that's been happening lately, I try not to do it too much. But okay. All right. So, gentlemen, any other optics, politics, knives, tripods, tripod vices, bourbon? Well, not bourbon, rum in this case. Questions? So TriggerCon is in Washington State, Bellevue, so Seattle. Seattle is not too far from Portland, so if I play my cards right and the show happens, I might be able to do it. Anything in particular looking forward to seeing at the next SHOT Show? Ask me in 6 months. It's too early. There are a couple of problems with the industry. One is that COVID kind of had an impact on everything. Another is that everybody is afraid that guns and everything can get banned, and with some justification. So the market is extremely active. All of the suppliers are having a very, very hard time keeping up with the demand. So it's not clear to me how much time they really have to innovate, make new things, etc. There is innovation happening. I'm privy to some of it, but it's too early to talk about it. What I really don't know is how much capacity they will have to really start doing new stuff. It's not clear to me. So I don't know what to expect from the next SHOT Show. There are some interesting things happening on the thermal side of things. That's sort of what I work with for my day job, that I'm curious to see if they will filter down into the civilian world, and a few other things, a few other clever things happening. But whether the industry is ready to bring it out by next SHOT Show, I really don't know. Like, the demand right now is remarkable. I mean, we added 8 million new gun owners, and the tens of millions that were gun owners before are scared shitless and are buying everything they can get their hands on. I've never seen a market like this. It's completely insane. So, earlier topic about lightweight LPVOs, perhaps as WFA 1 to 4. I thought as WFA discontinued it. It's a really nice lightweight scope. It's not day bright. That's the downside. I helped them design a regional reticle for it. I like that little scope. I think it works very well. But and for the money, I'm not sure if there's anything better still. But it gets into the same price range as like Burris RT6 and Delta Hornet that are 1 to 6 designs. And but they are a little bit heavier, right? So it's kind of choose what's important for you. TR24. I still have a sweet spot for the TR24, oldie but goodie. Thoughts? It is still a very nice scope. I wish they would refresh it without making it bigger. So for those who don't know, TR24 is what used to be called the 1 to 4 by 24 acupoint, and they've now relabeled it into Huron or something. I don't know what this. I don't. Let me see if I can quickly pull it up. Trigicon in the last SHOT Show renamed everything, and AccuPowers and AccuPoints all became something else. Is it not Trigicon Ascent? Hold on. I'm pulling up a. No, that's an LED illuminated one. No, that's not it. Hold on a sec. So let me see. I'm on Trigicon's website, looking at, is it Huron? Well, AccuPoint's still there, I wonder. Hold on one moment. No, it's not it. Okay, so I think it's still called AccuPoint, or maybe they're labeled in something else. It's there, 1 to 4 by 24 with a simple reticle. Most the ones that I like is just a post reticle with a triangle. The triangle is illuminated by fiber during the day and I think tritium at night. The weakness of the design is that you can't easily do holdovers and stuff like that. The strength of the design is that bright, large triangle is very easy to see and it does not depend on batteries. Another strength of this design, strength of this design is that it has huge exit pupil and 1 power, so it's really easy to get behind. There is this. Actually, I forgot to cover it in my earlier rant, but there is some correlation between exit pupil size and how easy a particular scope is to get behind, but not direct correlation. But general large exit pupil generally helps. And what I found is that with high erector ratio, high magnification ratio scopes, it's hard to keep the exit pupil on 1 power large. On high magnification, the exit pupil is just objective diameter divided by magnification, right? For example, for 1 to 4 by 24 rifle scope, the exit pupil on 4 power for any scope so configured is going to be 6 millimeters. But on 1 power, you're not using the entire objective of the rifle scope, so it's going to be something. What I found is that for speed, you generally want the exit pupil to be bigger than 10 millimeters. After that, you start getting diminishing returns. There are some with 6 millimeter exit pupil on 1 power. That's too small. I'm clearly faster as we get up to about 8.5 millimeters, faster at about 10 millimeters. Then I'm still getting faster, but not as faster. The little 1 to 4 AccuPoint, I think, has a 17 or 18 millimeter exit pupil on 1 power, so it's pretty easy to get behind. And if you don't need to extend the range, it's still competitive. It's a nice little scope. But the market has moved on, and if I were to choose for general purpose AR-15 use between the AccuPoint and let's say Steiner P4XI, I think they weigh about the same. Both are 1 to 4 scopes. I'd probably do the Steiner. But if you don't want to putz around with reticles and you don't extend the range, AccuPoint works great. COVID really took a hit on manufacturing. I even see it in the fishing and biking industry. Yeah, I believe it. And China is locking up again, so we're going to see more supply interruptions. So we'll see. Have you seen Joe Rogan's parody of Rachel Levine, Biden's health secretary? You should definitely watch it. I have not seen it. I will look it up. Joe Rogan is a funny dude. So. Okay, we're here at about 2 hours, 48 minutes, approaching 3 hours. Reasonable time. Except people on the East Coast are already done. People on the West Coast are finally waking up. Let's see, do I have any other? I've made this gallery here for a bunch of reticle pictures. Let me see if I have something that's good. Oh, there we go. So while there are no questions, this is looking through Schmidt and Bender 128 by 24 dual CC. This is on 1 power. Okay. Notice there's a bright dot in the center, and it's seriously bright dot. It's very easy to see, but the edge reticle you can't see. So if you did not have, if you had a dead reticle, a dead battery or something like that, what you would see would look like this. Okay. There's no real discernible aiming point that you can do much of anything with. Now, I was curious, and I went and did a bunch of shooting with a scope like this. Okay. And what I found was really interesting. Just like with the red dot sight, with a lot of red dot sights, if you turn off the reticle, just look through the tube, and you're even margin at close range, it's actually very fast. Whatever you see through there, pull the trigger, it's done. And I was able to do something similar with this. Within 20-25 yards, I actually don't need to see the dot. Whatever is kind of in the center of the field of view, you can make good center of mass hits. But it really, the ability to do so really diminishes as the distance extends. And I'm just not terribly comfortable aiming through a conventional scope without an aiming reticle. That was really the only notable flaw in the Schmidt and Bender dual CC. Aside from that, it's a wonderful scope. Let's see. Okay, Bill, what are your thoughts on pistol caliber carbines? You might have mentioned this, but I wasn't there. I don't have one, but they're getting interesting. Do you have any thoughts? In a grand scheme of things, I'm not a huge fan from the standpoint of terminal impact and stuff like that. I don't see a compelling reason to go with a pistol caliber carbine over something like 300 blackout. In a normal world, you can buy handgun ammo for a lot less money, so you can plink with it much more easily. But if I'm looking for cheap practice, I have 22 long rifle. I have rimfire, right? So I'm not sure what place pistol caliber carbines really take. That having been said, so I do have one. I have the T&W Arms, a switch barrel thing in 10 millimeter and 357 SIG. And 10 millimeter out of a 16-inch barrel is a pretty serious gun. And I kind of like it in the sense that there is it takes my Glock magazines. I like large flame 10 millimeter Glocks for some reason. But a pistol caliber carbine in 45 or 9 millimeter for me personally is not quite as interesting. In a carbine format, I'm not entirely sure what the allure is. What I do find interesting is a lever gun in 357 mag, 44 Remington mag, or 45 long Colt. Those rounds are actually quite nice out of a lever gun, efficient, hit fairly hard, and don't look nearly as scary as an AR-15. I think we live in a world where we're going to have another assault weapon ban fairly soon. There's high likelihood of that. I think if the Democrats push that through, they will lose the House and the Senate in 2 years. But for 2 years, they might be able to push it through. And a less scary-looking lever gun may be the way to go for a bit. I don't know. But personally, like I said, I don't understand the allure unless you want magazine commonality with your handgun. Been looking at the CZ brand 2 in 762 by 39. Been lots of reports of failures to extract, I assume. and it's extremely overguessed. CZ hasn't issued a fix yet and offering refunds. It's a shame because it looked like a great gun. I don't have any personal experience with that gun. Generally, CZ is a good company. They make good stuff. I have a few guns in 7.62 by 39, a couple of AKs, and Palmetto's KS47, which is an AR-15 modified to work off an AK magazine. I like the cartridge, but I have to say that there is something about the AK platform in this caliber. I'm not convinced that the CZ Brand 2 holds that much attraction for me. AKs have a reputation for not being terribly accurate. One case is an AKE from Palmetto that uses FN's hammer forged chrome lined barrel. It's actually quite accurate, and has decent trigger. So I'm not entirely sure what the allure of a CZ would be when they're much more commonly available with a lot of parts, etc. AK platform is actually getting fairly refined. But I don't know, on paper it looks like a great gun, but if they have issues, I would wait. Okay. Let's see. All right, let's see. My cold coffee. Still good coffee. Okay, so we're approaching 5 hours and questions seem to be tapering off, so it's entirely possible I'll actually get to sleep a little bit tonight. I'll go back to the reticle pictures for a moment since I haven't gotten to everything I wanted to earlier. Okay, so back to the reticle picture of the Schmidt. And I wanted to show you what the tree looks like. This is illuminated. Okay. So this is, I think, on 8 power, where you see the tree. In this case, I turned on the background illumination. And you see that the primary stadia are illuminated. Schmidt did a really, really good job with this reticle. In the sense that on 8 power, it was really, really easy to aim with. Usually, I don't like horizontal lines too much, but on this reticle, everything just works. So, I don't know. We'll see. Okay, I have a couple more questions. Let me see. Do you prefer Kalles Swarovski or Schmidt & Bender? It depends on the application, right? For front focal and long-range precision scopes, I prefer Schmidt to Kalles, but Kalles has a new version of the 5-25 that I haven't seen yet called the DLR, and it fixes at least some of the problems I had with the earlier model, so I need to look at it. But generally, I'd say, with that range, I prefer the Schmidt. Swarovski doesn't really have tactical scopes. They make wonderful hunting scopes. They're very good. And I think Swarovski and Schmidt & Bender hunting scopes go neck and neck, and I don't know if one is better than the other. The configurations are a little bit different, so you can kind of go look and pick and see what configuration, reticle, etc. works better for you. But I don't know if one is better than the other. With low power variables, Kalles has the 1-6 and 1-8 that are both very good. They're both second focal plane. So Kalles 1-6 is probably the best second focal plane 1-6 by 24 rifle scope on the market. It's fairly lightweight. It's very, very good optically. It has a good illumination. I've heard people say that they are a little bit fragile, but I haven't seen any of those issues myself, so I don't know. Once you go to the 1-8, Kalles is also second focal plane. A lot of people like it, and it works well for them. But as I talked about earlier, once you go toward higher magnification, top-end magnification, low power variables, I prefer front focal plane designs. So I prefer probably Schmidt, but Schmidt's a lot more money, right? So it's hard for me to say just go get a Schmidt dual CC when it's $4,500. If you can afford it and you're willing to spend it, get it. It's an amazing scope. But otherwise, I don't know. The CMMG bench in 10mm looks promising. Glock mags and roller delayed action. Yeah, I've seen, I've seen them on the web. I have not used it myself. It does look promising, and 10mm, is really pops out of a longer barrel, so there may be some value there. All right, Bill has had enough fun for one night. Thank you for all the questions, Bill, and good night. Until next time. Whew. Cheers. All right, gentlemen. We are at exactly 3 hours now. If there are any more questions, I'll give it a few more minutes, and then I'm going to log off. All right. Thank you for all of you guys who chimed in and listened. I really do appreciate it. You spent 3 hours with me. If you're adventurous enough to be here for the entire thing, and it means a lot to me. I appreciate it. If there's anything I didn't cover, or if something I said that generates more questions, ask in the comments or go to my website, ask there. And please subscribe and join, either here or on Locals. I'm trying to set up my channel so that I don't depend on advertising and things like that. But we'll see. Thank you all. And good night, Mr. T-shirt. Good night, Kenji. Yeah, anytime. Thank you for chiming in. Really appreciate it. Well, it depends, Doug. It depends on what you're looking for. I mean, March is an interesting company. They don't make anything that's bad, but a lot of their stuff is fairly specialized into target precision shooting, right? So their new stuff is getting better. The 5-42 is very good. 4.5-28 looks very promising. The new 1-10 is very promising. 1.5-15 looks nice. They make really nice stuff. And they make it comparatively light. So that's sort of their niche. And I like it. I like lightweight designs. Good to see you here, Dan. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think I am done for tonight. Once again, thank you all for participating and asking questions. Goodbye and good night.